Hello. How are you guys doing? Hello, Pastel. My cat wants to be in my lap right now. That's not gonna work for me. Hi, Felicia. Hi, Rosie. Taco, you say hi, and then I gotta put you down. You gonna say hi? Hi, MJ. You gonna say hi to everybody? You can't stay in my arms all day. I gotta read a book. Huh? Baby boy, I gotta read a book. Hi, G, Victoria. Hi, Jessie. Taco, say hi. Taco Man, say hi. Hi, Bien Beacon. Oh my god, that was the cutest thing. His little quacks, I swear. Taco. Oh, did you? That's so funny. I'm here. I'm on. With my kitty. But I'm gonna have to put him down. He hates the bright lights. Every time I put him up, he squints so bad. But his eyes are normally like so big. They're huge and round like saucers. Are you a fan of EXO? Honey, you clearly don't watch my channel. EXO are my ults. Chan Yol is my ult bias, and Baekhyun is my ult wrecker. I am Chan Beck for life. Yes, I am a huge fan of EXO. Today, though, oh my god, hope I can do this. God, my throat's already like weird. Hi, Saya. So today, though, we are here to finish reading. Demian, we are here to finish reading this. Hi, Naz. So yeah, we left off. We just finished chapter 4. We were getting into chapter 5. For those of you who don't know why we're reading this, is because I am currently going through the BTS storyline with Caitlin. I've already been through the BTS storyline. It's very in-depth. I've already been through it with Caitlin, and I am going through it again, showing her the storyline. We are about to dive into the Wings episodes, but I know a lot of it has like the quotes that RM does in the beginning of every single Wing episode. Hi, Loudy. Is from this book. And so the first time around when I reacted to the series, I had not read this book yet. So I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this again, I'm going to dive even deeper, and I'm going to read the books this time so I can get any sort of extra little bits of knowledge that I hadn't had the first time. I can maybe get them this time around, and yeah, and go for it and do it and fully dive in, fully commit. I'm trying to get like all the caffeine out before I start. I think once I start reading, I'll be fine. But yeah, so we kind of left off with our main character. What's his name? It starts with an S. Sinclair. It starts off with our main character, Sinclair. Oh, and by the way, for anyone who's on here now, don't forget my normal lives where I chit chat with you guys are on Saturdays. So tomorrow I will be going live at my normal time at 1 p.m. my time. 1 p.m. Oh my God, Naz. Oh my God. Okay. Thank you for that. Oh, that's scary, Naz. That's scary, but I'm looking forward to it, to say the least. Oh my God. Caitlin and I will have to film a reaction to that. What was I saying? Oh yeah, my normal lives where I chit chat with you guys and we talk about everything, and I do a lot of photo card giveaways during my lives and everything like that. That's on Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, my time. Hi, Piper. So today we are here to finish reading this book. That's what we're here today for. So we left off with Sinclair's kind of been through a little. I literally just dropped the book. That just happened. That just happened. Let's see if I can get it with my toes. Let's see. Maybe. Ooh. Nope, I dropped it again. I'm trying to see. I'm exercising my toes here. I got it. Hi, Carla. Okay, so Sinclair is kind of a dramatic fella. I think it's more he just takes things to heart when he does something wrong, and he feels like he almost needs to be punished for the simplest little infraction. But I mean, this book was written back in like 1919, so things I guess had a lot, you know, heavier meaning back then. If you did something wrong, now it's like, you know, you do a little thing wrong, it's no big deal, you know. But back then, I feel like people, especially people from like a nicer family, like held themselves to a higher standard. Like kids weren't bad kids, like they were good kids, they were well behaved, they were proper. So for a kid to all of a sudden become ill behaved and improper, that's a lot, you know, for especially for back in that time. So so yeah, so hello, hi, I love BTS. Today we are here to read the second half of the book that is the book that they quote a lot in the Wings films and in Blood, Sweat, and Tears and stuff like that. So we're going to read the second half of that. So, sorry. Hi, Priscilla. So it starts off with, thank you, Amy. It's dirty. I need to wash it, so I needed to do something with it. But thank you. Shouldn't have said anything. That's still curls from 2 days ago. That's still my curls from 2 days ago when I was on here last. This side just didn't hold the curl as well as this side did. I don't know why, but whatever. Anyway, so what I was saying was Sinclair found himself into he was hanging out with all right, no worries, I'll see you later. He found himself hanging out with this group of friends. One of the kids that decided to start hanging out with them was kind of not from as great of a family as he was, but he wanted to impress him nonetheless, so he made up this elaborate story about how he stole a sack of apples in an orchard, and the kid said that he was going to tell, even though it was a made-up story, he obviously didn't want to tell the kid that it was a made-up story because he wanted to seem like he was all, you know, tough and everything. And the kid was like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to tell on you, and that guy's going to end up paying me money for letting him know who the thief was. And so the kid doesn't want to get in trouble for something he didn't actually do, but he also doesn't want this other kid to know that he was a liar. So he decides to just say, look, I'll pay you. And so he gets into this, you know, to this thing where now he owes this kid favors and money, and this kid's just making him do all kinds of stupid stuff, and he's doing one bad thing after another, just so the kid won't tell on him about a story he made up to begin with. Just a whole kind of silly thing. His family is very, very well, like just bright, happy, beautiful family. Goes to church all the time, you know, very Christian, you know, well-behaved family. He has 2 sisters. They're the sweetest things. And now he feels that because he's now kind of, you know, done all these evil deeds, that he's kind of no longer a part of his family, even though he is, because he doesn't deserve to be, in a way, because he's now like tainted in a way, because of what he's been doing and how he's been behaving. So he you know, time goes by, he still owes this kid favors. Then another kid comes into town, a new kid, and that kid is Demian. And he immediately senses that this kid is different from the rest, and he seems older, he seems wiser, yet he's in his same class, and can't really quite pinpoint exactly what's different about him, but just something is different. Anyway, I don't want to make too long of a story short. I'm just trying to recap as best as I can. Demian ends up helping out Sinclair and getting the kid off of his back. So the kid stops bothering him. This kid stops threatening to tell on him. The kid stops demanding favors and money from him. So now he kind of sort of feels almost like he owes Demian in a way. Like at first he just says, you know, kind of thank you, and doesn't think about it again. Kind of feels normal again, kind of feels he's okay back with his family again. But as time passes, he can't stop thinking about this kid who helped him, Demian. And he almost feels in a way like he's indebted to him because of the favor that he did, even though they don't really talk about that. So he hangs out with him a little bit more, gets a little bit closer with him, finds out that this kid's very, very interesting. Kind of, it almost seems like this kid can control people with his mind, but yet how could that be? You can't really do that. That's crazy, right? But it's weird. Like this, and this kid's trying to teach him his ways, but he doesn't quite understand it. He's like, that can't be. Anyway, makes him rethink a lot of things in life. Just makes him basically try to look at things with an open point of view rather than a closed mindset point of view. He's like, when you read this and when you approach it, I'm just doing a recap right now, guys. Hi. When you look at this situation and you approach it, don't think of it as the way you were always taught to think of it. Think of it in a different way. I did thank you, Ebony, and I think Kai on Strive. Both of you guys sent me like lists, so thank you. So yeah, so he starts, he starts kind of trying to think of things in a different way, but he almost feels like, it's wrong to think of things in a different way because it should be this way because that's how I was always taught, So he kind of feels wrong in doing that, and he has like this inner struggle, almost like wanting to be more open-minded, but also feeling that it's wrong to be open-minded because they're talking about religion and things in the Bible, and he's like, no, it's wrong to question that type of stuff, So anyway, he ends up going to school. He ends up going away for school for like college, right? So he doesn't really see Demian after a while. When he first gets to school, he's a pretty good kid. I'm trying to remember like what happened to kind of make him start. Oh yeah, I think he's like walking in a park or something, and he sees this one kid from his school, and he ends up going into a tavern with this kid, and he ends up like, the kid's just like, oh, what, you don't drink? Are you too good to drink? Or, blah, blah, blah. So he ends up drinking for the first time, gets drunk for the first time ever, and then kind of finds, solitude in that numbness of drinking and partying and having a good time. He used to be the type of person that found comfort in being alone and being in his own thoughts and with himself, and he lost that comfort along the way. And he doesn't find comfort in that anymore. So now he's finding comfort in other things, like in numbing that feeling by drinking and partying and hanging out with people. And so, his grades start dropping. He becomes, a horrible student. He's getting suspension letters. It's being, he's getting threatened to being kicked out of school. And one day, all of a sudden, he even went back home during like Christmas break or whatever. Didn't feel comfortable in his own home because he felt like he didn't belong there anymore, like he wasn't worthy of being in that home anymore, because he felt that he, the devil has basically got a hold of him and he's now just bad. And the whole time he keeps, randomly he'll think about Demian randomly, right? But when he went back home, I think he ran into... At first, he doesn't talk about running into Demian when he goes back home, but then he goes back to it later in the book, and he talks about how he did run into Demian when he went back home, and it was that same thing where they talk about a different situation, and he makes them question things again, like, is that really how it is, or is that how people have taught you it should be? What about it being this way? You know what I mean? So it's like Demian keeps making him question things in life, and I don't know, this Demian character is very, very interesting. I'm so intrigued by this kid. Anyway, he goes back to school, and nothing his parents said to him, the threat of being expelled from college, none of that has really made a difference, or from boarding school, whatever. None of that really has made a difference. He's still back to his old ways, drinking in the taverns and getting drunk and partying and everything. Until one day he's walking, I forget where, but he's walking and he sees this girl, and there was just something about her. He doesn't know what it was. She wasn't nothing extraordinary. There was just something about her that it struck her and it captured his attention. And from that moment on, he wanted to be a better person for her. So much so that he went home and he tried to draw her. He bought all kinds of paints and art supplies so he could draw her, so he could capture the image of her face that he remembers. He didn't know her name or anything like that, but he knew that he wanted to be a better person for this girl. And so he tries to draw her, makes several attempts, fails. He keeps trying to redraw her, and he ends up drawing a painting that he likes. It's not quite her, but it's not her either, if that makes sense. So Demian sounds like the type of person who questions reality. Who questions reality? Sorry, one second. So the more he stares at this, like, kind of like, painting, he's like, it looks like her, but it doesn't look like her. But he can't really pinpoint exactly who it looks like, right? And so he ends up, I think one day he ends up pinning the picture to, like, the cross section where, like, the light comes, like his window, the light shining into the window. He pins the picture up to the window, and the light's shining through it, and in that image, the face almost like looked like someone else completely, and he felt that looked like Demian. He was like, I don't have a cold now. When I talk a lot, plus I just ate something right before I started this, and sometimes when I eat something, I think I have food allergies. I don't know, like I like cough, and I have to clear my throat a lot after I eat. It's really annoying. But yeah, anyway, but no, I don't have a cold. Thank God I don't have a cold. But yeah, so the picture ends up realizing that what he couldn't figure out, like, what does that picture look like? He's like, it looks like Demian. And then he starts thinking of Demian again, and he's just like, why can't I stop thinking about, like, this kid? He always comes back. It always comes back to Demian. Why can't I stop thinking of this kid, Demian? Like, what is it about him? Ends up I think he ended up having, like, his window open or something, and it was raining or something, and then the picture fell, and then rain got on the picture, so the picture kind of looked different. He tried to dry it with some blotting paper and put it between two books, and when he looked at it again, the picture looked completely different once again, and he felt like the picture looked like himself this time. I hope I'm getting all this right, by the way. I'm trying to recap as best as I can. I was getting cross-eyed by the end of the last time of me reading everything. And so, yeah, at this point, he felt almost like the painting resembled him now. And so the painting just keeps on kind of taking on a different, approach, I guess you can say. Or persona. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah, so we're at the point now where he is recapping when he did go home on vacation. He did actually meet up with Demian, and he just forgot to tell us about it, so he just recapped that in the story. And once more, just Demian making him question things in life, making him think more deeply into things. And this is where he dreamt about the coat of arms above his door that had the picture of the bird on it, and how he dreamt that he mailed the picture. That he dreamt that he mailed the picture? He did mail the picture. Yo, no, it says, I wouldn't have been able to write a letter to Demian even if I had known where to send it. With that same dreamlike presentiment that was guiding all my actions at the time, I decided to send him the picture of the sparrowhawk, whether it reached him or not. I wrote no message on it, not even my name. I trimmed the edges carefully, bought a large envelope, and wrote my friend's former address on it, and then mailed it. Which, of course, makes me think of the storyline. The picture being put into the envelope and given to somebody else. Picture of the bird. By the way, if you guys are commenting on this, please try not to comment any spoilers in regards to the BTS storyline. Caitlin is still reacting to it. So if you guys start referencing things that are going to happen or things that are going to come up, because remember, she's only seen up to Young Forever, and that's it. She hasn't seen past Young Forever. So we're reading this now, so that way this weekend we can record all the Wings episodes and start releasing those to you guys as well. So yes, please do not spoil anything that has to do with the storyline in this book and stuff, okay? Yep, that's why I'm not talking. And as you're horrible at spoilers, she's the worst. Yeah, so please don't do that. That would be very, very kind of you if you did not do that. All right, so that's where we're at right now. Yeah, so let's pick up where we left off. Did I miss anything, guys? Did I kind of recap that okay? Let me know if I might have missed something. And I noticed in reading the books, I could pinpoint in some of the books the different quotes that RM had read aloud. Sounded like a good recap. Yay! Okay, good. That means I was paying attention. Yay! Yeah, like that one where he's like, which one where he's like, something of which I no longer wanted to have anything to do. Oh, I forget which one, but RM says that in before one of the videos, and I read that in here, and I was like, ooh, that sounds familiar. Yeah, that was good. You remembered more than me. Oh, good, yay! Okay, good. I feel better. I feel good because I was like, am I remembering everything properly and correctly? Because I do, like, I know sometimes people can read something, and then you ask, what did you just read? And people are like, I have no idea. And I used to do that. That was me as a kid. That was great. I feel like I know what's going on because I haven't read the book yet. Okay, good. Yay! Okay, cool. Yeah, I felt like it was a struggle to kind of start it. But once I kind of got a little bit more into the storyline, maybe by like chapter 2, I was like, okay, now I feel like a story is developing. But chapter 1, I felt like was kind of a struggle to get through. So yeah. What was I gonna say before we get started? We've had several quotes until now. The one you mentioned is from Blood, Sweat, and Tears, probably because that's the one I've seen the most. Yeah. And I love when RM quotes it, and he's, instead of saying realm, he says realm. He's so cute. Oh man. Anyway, yes, that's what I was talking about. Reading comprehension. Yes, that I used to struggle with that in school. I would read an entire paragraph, and then I would be asked to summarize what I just read. Wouldn't be able to do it. No freaking clue. The evil world with which I don't want to have anything to do. Yes. Yeah, so we've already read that quote. We've read a couple of other quotes as well that sounded familiar to me. I was like, that sounds familiar. Which is really kind of cool to be able to like pinpoint those in the book itself. That's kind of fun. But yeah, so let's go ahead and let's get into this. I hope you guys are, yeah, so anyway, that's what I was going to say. So I was actually kind of proud of myself that I retained as much information as I did. Here's the link to the second, yes. Yeah, I'm kind of happy that I retained as much as I did reading it and recapping it back. So yeah, that makes me very happy because I know in school, which obviously that's been a long time ago, but I definitely struggled with doing that in school. All right, you ready, guys? Let's dive into this. Let's do this. Let me take the cap off my water because I know I will be drinking that a lot. Let me put some more chapstick on because I'm going to be talking so much. I know my chaps are going to get lipped. My lips will get chapped. Yeah. Okay. So let's do this, guys. Okay. Let's get back into it. Can you guys hear me okay? Is my volume good? I hope my volume's good. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's fine. All right. Let's do this. Chapter 5. The bird fights its way out of the egg. Okay. Okay, there it goes. All right. My painted dream bird was on its way, seeking out my friend. I received a reply in the strangest way. Once, in my classroom, at my seat, after the break between 2 lessons, I found a note sticking out of my book. It was folded exactly the way we usually did when classmates occasionally sent one another private messages during a lesson. The only thing I wondered about was who had sent me such a note, because I was never on such terms with any of my schoolmates. I thought it would be an invitation to join in some schoolboy prank, which I certainly wouldn't participate in, and I stuck the note into the front of my book without reading it. It was only during the lesson that it accidentally fell into my hands again. I played with the paper, unfolded it without thinking about what I was doing, and found a few words written on it. I cast a glance at it, and my attention was caught by one word. I got frightened and read it. My whole heart contracted in the face of destiny as if it had suffered a strong chill. Quote, "The bird is fighting its way out of the egg. The egg is the world. Whoever wishes to be born must destroy a world. The bird is flying to God. The God is named Abraxas." Oh, that's familiar too, isn't it? Okay, sorry. Okay. After reading those lines several times, I was plunged into deep reflection. Without a possible doubt, it was a reply from Demian. No one could know about the bird except for the two of us. He had received my picture. He had understood it and was helping me to interpret it. But how was it all connected? And this tormented me especially. What was the meaning of Abraxas? I had never heard or read the word. The god is named Abraxas. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The lesson ended and I hadn't heard anything the teacher said. The next one began, the last one for the morning. It was given by a young auxiliary teacher fresh from the university. We liked him already because he was so young and didn't put on face airs of dignity with us. Under Dr. Fullen's direction, we were reading Herodotus. Reading was one of the few academic subjects that interested me. But this time I wasn't paying attention. I had opened my book mechanically, but I wasn't following along as the students translated. I was lost in my own thoughts. Besides, I had already found out several times how right Demian had been about what he had once told me in our religion class. If you wanted something hard enough, you succeeded. Whenever I was greatly occupied with my own thoughts during a class, I could be sure the teacher would leave me alone. Yes, whenever you were distracted or sleepy, there he was all of a sudden. That, too, had already happened to me. But when you were really thinking, really concentrating, you were protected. And I had already tried out that business with hard staring, too, and I had found that it had worked. Back then, in Demian's time, I hadn't succeeded. But now, I often observed that you could accomplish quite a lot by looking and thinking. So now, too, I sat there, far away from Herodotus in school. But then, unexpectedly, the teacher's voice burst into my consciousness like a lightning flash, so that I woke up in a panic. I heard his voice. He was standing right next to me. I thought he had called my name, but he wasn't looking at me, and I was relieved. Then I heard the voice again. Loudly, it spoke the word Abraxas. Dr. Fullen continued an explanation, the beginning of which I had missed. We mustn't imagine, this is a quote from the professor, we mustn't imagine that the views of those sects and mystic associations of antiquity were as naive as they seem from the standpoint of rationalistic examination. The ancients were altogether unacquainted with science and our sense of the word. Instead, they were concerned with philosophical and mystical, I feel like I have a cat hair on my mouth, philosophical and mystical truths to a highly developed degree. One result of this was magic and tomfoolery that, to be sure, frequently led to swindling and crime. But magic, too, had noble origins and profound thoughts. For example, the doctrine of Abraxas, which I cited earlier. Scholars speak that name in connection with Greek magical formulas, and many consider it to be the name of some devil associated with magic, such as primitive peoples still worship today. But it seems that Abraxas had a much greater significance. We may look upon the name that of a deity who had the symbolic task of combining the godlike and the devilish. So, Abraxas is a deity who had a symbolic task of combining the godlike and the devilish. Interesting. The learned little man continued speaking elegantly and eagerly. No one paid much attention, and since the name didn't occur again, my own attention was soon withdrawn into myself again. Combining the godlike and the devilish resounded in my ears. This was something that touched me personally. It was familiar to me from my talks with Demian in the very last stage of our friendship. Demian had then said that we most likely had a god whom we revered, but that he represented only an arbitrary detached half of the world. This was the official, permissible, bright world. But we had to be able to revere the whole world, so either we had to have a god who was also the devil, or else we had to establish a service of the devil alongside our divine service of God. And now, then, Abraxas was the god who was both God and devil. For a time I pursued the trail further, but made no progress. I also leafed through an entire library looking for Abraxas, with no success. But my nature was never much inclined toward the sort of direct, conscious searching, in which at first you only find truths that lie in your hands like lifeless stones. The figure of Beatrice, which is the girl he drew. The figure of Beatrice, which for some time had occupied me so greatly and profoundly, now gradually submerged, or rather, it moved slowly away from me, getting closer and closer to the horizon and becoming more shadowy, distant, and pallid. It was no longer enough for my soul. Now, in that oddly self-centered existence that I was leading like a dreaming sleepwalker, a new development began to take shape. A longing for life blossomed with me. Rather, the longing for love and my sexual drives, which for a time I had been able to sublimate in my adoration of Beatrice, were demanding new images and goals. No fulfillment was coming my way as yet, and I found it more impossible than ever to delude my longing and expect anything from the girls with whom my schoolmates were seeking their happiness. I was once more dreaming frequently and more by day than at night. Ideas, images, or wishes rose up in my mind and drew me away from the world outside, so that I lived and conversed with these mental images, these dreams or shadows, more truly and vividly than with my real surroundings. A certain dream or play of imagination that kept reoccurring became meaningful to me. This dream, the most important and memorable in my life, was more or less like this. I was returning to my father's house. Over the doorway, the bird in the coat of arms shone in yellow against the blue background. In the house, my mother came up to me, but when I walked in and wanted to embrace her, it was no longer she, but a figure I had never seen, tall and powerful, resembling Max Demian and my portrait painting, but different, and despite its mightiness, completely feminine. This figure drew me to itself and received me in a loving embrace that was profoundly thrilling. Rapture and horror were mingled. The embrace was a divine service, but also a crime. There was too much lurking in the figure embracing me that was reminiscent of my mother, too much that was reminiscent of my friend Demian. Its embrace was a breach of all respect, and yet blissful. I often awoke from that dream with a feeling of profound happiness, often with deathly fear, my conscience tortured as if by some frightful sin. Only gradually and unconsciously was a connection established between that exclusively mental picture and the hint about the God I must seek and that had come to me from the outside. But then the connection became tighter and more intimate, and I began to notice that, in that very dream of premonition, I was invoking Abraxas. Rapture and terror, man and woman combined, the most sacred and most hideous things interwoven, deep guilt quivering in the heart of the gentlest innocence. Such was the image of my dream of love, and such was Abraxas also. Love was no longer an obscure animal urge, as I had conceived it anxiously at the beginning, nor was it any longer a spiritualized, pious worship, such as I had offered to the image of Beatrice. It was both much more still. It was an angelic image and Satan, a man and woman in one, human being and animal, the highest good and extreme evil. To experience this seemed to be my lot, to taste of it my destiny. I longed for it and feared it, but it was always there, always hovering over me. The following spring, I was to leave secondary school and go to a university. I didn't know where yet, or what I would study. A little mustache was growing above my lips, I was a grown man, and yet completely helpless and aimless. The only thing was certain, the voice within me, the dream image. I felt it incumbent on me to follow that lead blindly. It was hard for me, and I rebelled daily. Maybe I'm crazy, I often thought. Maybe I'm not like other people. But I could do everything the others were capable of. With a little diligence and effort, I could read Plato, solve problems in trigonometry, or follow chemical analysis. There was only one thing I couldn't do: tear out the obscurely hidden aim within me and visualize it somewhere before my eyes, as others did. Those who knew precisely what they wanted to become: a professor, a judge, doctor, or artist. Those who knew how long that would take them and what benefits it would bring them. I couldn't do that. Maybe I would become something of the sort in the future, but how was I to know? Perhaps I might even have to seek for years and never become anything or reach any goal. Perhaps I might reach some goal, but it would be evil, perilous, and frightening. All I really wanted was to try and live the life that was spontaneously welling up within me. Why was that so very difficult? I often made the attempt to paint the powerful, amorous figure of my dream, but I never succeeded. If I had succeeded, I would have sent that picture to Demian. Where was he? I didn't know. I only knew that he was linked to me. When would I see him again? The welcome repose I had during the weeks and months of Beatrice period was long past. At the time I thought I had reached an island and found peace, but that's how it always went. As soon as one condition had become dear to me, as soon as I had a dream, had As soon as a dream had comforted me, it was already withering and tarnished. No use lamenting over it. I was now living in a blaze of unsatisfied desire, of suspenseful expectancy that often made me wild and crazy. I often saw the image of my dream beloved. Okay. I often saw the image of my dream beloved before me with more than lifelike clarity, much more clearly than my own hand. I spoke to it, wept before it, and cursed it. I called it mother, and it knelt before it in tears. I called it beloved, and sensed its ripe, awful, fulfilling kiss. I called it the devil and whore, vampire and murderess. It lured me into the tenderest dreams of love and into acts of dissolute shamelessness. Nothing was too good and precious for it. Nothing too bad and vile. So it's like the ultimate neutral. Hey Monk, I hope you got my email, by the way. I'm reading the second half of the book for the storyline, by the way. That's what I'm doing on live right now. But yes, Monk, I hope you got my email. It's a long ass email, but it's everything you need for BTS non-storyline content to react to. Sorry, I'm taking a break, guys. I'll do the storyline stuff later. You have plenty of stuff to keep you occupied for quite a while. Okay. Yes, you did. I'm in the studio. The studio book? What? What's the studio book? What are you talking about? Okay, you got it. Okay. Yeah, it has a lot of information, so just make sure you read through it. Because I put extra stuff in there as well. So yeah, so just make sure that you oh, you're here for the audiobook. At the very beginning of this video, I recap the first half. If you want to go back to the beginning and you can listen to my recap of the first half of the book. But yeah, I do put extras, extra links to things that people are going to request from you. Like when you react to Spring Day MV, they're going to request the explained video, so I also put that link for you. When you react to what is it? The Love Yourself campaign video, I also put RM's UNICEF speech with it because they're going to request for you to listen to that. So I added extra little things along with these MVs that I know people are going to ask you for, so you might as well do them both in the same reaction. You know what I mean? So I tried to make sure like I was smart about like when I linked Serendipity, I also linked a cover that Sean from Boyz II Men did of Serendipity and him talking about him going to the concert and his experience of that. So, which is something I knew that you would love to see. So, it was awesome, by the way, that watching Sean from Boyz II Men cover Serendipity on the guitar in Korean was crazy and amazing. So I knew little things like that I also added because I know based on my experience, these are comments you're going to get requested. So I've tried to give you as much information as possible to make people as happy as possible when watching your reactions and stuff. So I put a lot of information in there. So just make sure that you read through it before you click on anything or react to anything. Just read through it, okay? All right, I'm going to go back to my book. Sorry for that little segue, guys. Monk's here, and I just sent him. I'm guiding him through reacting to BTS. So I just needed to tell him that real quick because we don't get a chance to really talk much other than in comments here and there. So yeah, sorry, that was a little mini break. I just needed to talk to Monk real quick since I saw him here. So yeah, so I hope once again, just hit me up on Insta if you have any questions about anything I sent you. Just ask me on Insta and I'll answer you. I'm always on my social media, so okie dokie. But yeah, if you guys haven't checked him out, go over to his channel. He's starting to get into BTS. He knows BTS, but he's getting into actually starting from scratch and really getting into like learning all about them. So yeah, he just finished doing the who are the 7 members, like who is BTS, who are the 7 members of BTS. He just finished reacting to that, so he's going to start getting into everything starting from scratch, starting from those 2 cute little pre-debut videos and going from there. So okay, back at it. Yeah, I need a small break for my eyes anyway. This thing, oh my god, after 3 hours last time, I was so cross-eyed. Okay, so let's get back into it. All right. Let's see, where was I? Okay, so it seems like this thing that he keeps dreaming of is basically like almost like an ultimate neutral, right? Like nothing's too good or precious, but nothing's too bad or vile. So it's like the ultimate neutral in a way. It's like the best of both. It almost seems, and that's why maybe he can't stop thinking about it, because that's what he's been looking for. Because it's almost like him, because you know how like he knows he's good, but he also feels he's not good because of the bad decisions he's made in his past. So that's probably why he's gravitating towards this Abraxas thought and theory and kind of character, because he probably feels most comfortable with it based on what it represents, you know? Anyway, okay. But yeah, so once again, I recapped. If you're just now watching this and you haven't read the first half, the very beginning of this, I recapped the first half of the book. So if you want to rewind to that and just listen to that recap, you're more than welcome to. Okay, so let's get back to where we were. I spent that whole winter in a mental storm that's hard for me to describe. I had been so long accustomed to solitude, it didn't oppress me. I lived with Demian, with the sparrowhawk, with the image of the tall dream figure that was my destiny and my beloved. That was enough to live in, because it all looked toward great distant things, and it all pointed towards Abraxas. But none of these dreams, none of these thoughts obeyed me. I couldn't summon any of them. I couldn't lend color to any of them at will. They came and took over me. I was governed by them, and they lived my life. To be sure, I was outwardly secured. I had no fear of people. My schoolmates had found that out too, and showed me a secret respect that often made me smile. Whenever I wished, I could see through most of them very well, and occasionally amaze them that way. But I seldom or never felt like it. I always occupied myself with myself. I was always occupied with myself, always with myself. Okay. And I desired ardently to experience a little bit of life finally, to give something of myself to the world, to create a relationship with it and do battle with it. Sometimes when I roamed through the streets in the evening and in my restlessness, I was unable to return to my room until midnight. I would imagine that I just met my beloved now. She would pass by at some next corner, call me from the nearest window. Sometimes, too, all this seemed unbearably painful to me, and I was mentally prepared to take my life at some point. At that time, I found a peculiar refuge by accident, as people say, but there are no such accidents. When someone who badly needs something finds it, it isn't an accident that brings it his way, but he himself, his own desire and necessity lead him to it. 2 or 3 times on my walks through town, I had heard organ music coming from a smallish suburban church, but I had never stopped to listen. When I passed by the next time, I heard it again and recognized the music being by Bach. I went to the door, which I found locked, and since there was practically no one on the street, I sat down next to the church on a curbstone, pulled my coat collar up around my neck, and listened. It wasn't a big organ, but a good one, and it was being played marvelously with a unique, highly personal expressiveness filled with willpower and perseverance that sounded like a prayer. I felt that the man playing there knew that a treasure was locked away in that music and was suing, insisting, and striving for that treasure as if for his life. In the technical sense, I didn't understand very much about music, but ever since my childhood, I have instinctively understood precisely this soulful expressiveness and have felt musicality as something natural inside of me. And have felt musicality, I was right. After that, the musician played something modern too, perhaps by Rieger. The church was almost completely dark, with just a very thin ray of light coming from the nearest window. I waited until the music was over, and then prowled up and down until I saw the organist coming out. He was still young, though older than me, with a burly, squat figure, and he walked away rapidly with strong, seemingly reluctant steps. From that time on, at the evening hour, I frequently sat or paced back and forth in front of the church. I once found the door open and sat in a pew for a half an hour, feeling cold but happy, while the organist was playing above by the meager gaslight. In the music he played, I didn't hear merely him himself. In addition to that, everything he played seemed to me to be interrelated with some secret connection. Everything he played was religious, devout, and pious, but not with the piety of churchgoers and pastors. Rather, with the piety of medieval pilgrims and beggars. It was pious with an unconditional surrender to a universal emotion that rose above any particular faith. He diligently played composers earlier than Bach and old Italian masters, and they all stated the same thing. They all stated what the musician had in his soul as well: longing, the most intimate grasping of the word, and the most reckless separation from it again, an ardent listening to one's own obscure soul, a frenzy of devotion and a profound curiosity for the miraculous. Once I was secretly following the organist after he left the church. I saw him enter a small tavern far out at the edge of town. I couldn't resist and I followed him in. Here, for the first time, I had a clear look at him. He was sitting at a table in the corner of a small room, his black felt hat on his head, a glass of wine in front of him, and his face was just as I had expected. It was ugly and rather wild, the face of a seeker, stubborn, mulish, and strong-willed, but at the same time soft and childlike around the mouth. All his masculinity and strength were in the eyes and forehead, while the lower part of his face was tender and immature, uncontrolled and somewhat weak. His chin, full of indecisiveness, was like a boy's, in contrast to his forehead and eyes. I liked his dark brown eyes filled with pride and hostility. I sat down opposite him in silence. There was no one else in the tavern. He glared at me as if he wanted to chase me away, but I kept my ground and looked at him steadily until he rudely grumbled. Why are you staring so damn hard? Do you want something from me? I don't want anything from you, I said, but I've already received a lot from you. He furrowed his brow. So you're a music fan. I find it disgusting to be a music fan. I didn't let myself be scared away. I've already listened to you often in the church down there, I said. Anyhow, I don't want to bother you. I thought I might find something in you, something special. I don't rightly know what, but it's better if you don't listen to me. After all, I can listen to you in the church. But I always lock the door. Well, recently you forgot to and I sat inside. I usually stand outside or I sit on the curbstone. Is that right? Well, next time you can come in, it's warmer. All you need to do is knock at the door, but hard, and not while I'm playing. Now, out with it. What did you want to say? You're a very young man, probably a secondary school or university student. Are you a musician? No, I like listening to music, but only the kind you play. Absolute music. The kind that makes you feel something that's rattling at the doors of heaven and hell. I like music very much. I think it's because it's so unconcerned with morality. Everything else is moralistic, and I'm looking for something that isn't. I've always derived nothing but suffering from morality. I can't express it properly. Do you know that there must be a God who's both God and devil? They say there once was one. I've heard about it. The musician pushed his broad hat back a little and shook the dark hair away from his large forehead. While doing so, he gave me a penetrating look and bent his face towards me over the table. In a quiet, tense voice, he asked, "What's the name of the God you're talking about?" Unfortunately, I know almost nothing about him, actually only his name, which is Abraxas. The musician looked around as if suspiciously, as if someone could be spying on us. Then he moved closer to me and whispered, "I thought as much. Who are you?" "I'm a secondary student." "How did you find out about Abraxas?" "By accident." He banged on the table, making his wine glass run over. "Accident? Don't talk crap, young man. No one hears about Abraxas by accident. I'll make note of that. I'll tell you even more about him. I know a little about him." He fell silent and pushed his chair back. When I looked at him with vivid expectation, he grimaced. "Not here. Another time. Take this." As he said this, he reached into the pocket of his coat, which he hadn't taken off, and pulled out a few roasted chestnuts which he had tossed in front of me. I said nothing, took them, ate them, and was very contented. "So then," he whispered after a pause, "where did you hear about him?" I didn't hesitate to tell him. I was alone and at a loss, I recounted, and then I recalled a friend of earlier days, who I believed knows a great deal. I had painted a picture, a bird emerging from a globe. I sent it to him. After a while, when I didn't really expect any more, I found a piece of paper in my hand on which was written, "The bird is fighting its way to the egg. The egg is the world. Whoever wishes to be born must destroy a world. The bird is flying to God. The God is named Abraxas." He made no response. We peeled our chestnuts and ate them with wine. "Shall we have another glass?" he asked. "No thanks, I don't like to drink." He laughed, somewhat disappointed. "As you like, it's different with me. I'm going to stay here longer. You can go now." I feel like I have cat hair on my freaking nose, sorry. The next time I went after, no, that's not what it says. The next time I went with him after his organ session, he wasn't very communicative. He led me to a narrow old street and up and through an imposing old house into a large, rather gloomy and squalid room. in which only the piano gave any hint of music, whereas a tall bookcase and a desk gave the room the air of a scholar's study. You've got a lot of books, I said admiringly. Part of it's from my father's library. I live with him. Yes, young man, I live with my father and mother, but I can't introduce you to them. The company I keep isn't well thought of in this house. You see, I'm a prodigal son. My father is a fabulously respectable man, an eminent parson and preacher in this town, and I, to inform you right away, am his talented and promising son, who, however, has gone wrong and a little crazy. I was a divinity student, but shortly before the government examination, I abandoned that honorable faculty. Though I'm actually still in the same department as far as my private studies are concerned, I am still interested and fascinated by the sort of gods that people have invented for themselves in the course of history. Besides that, I'm now a musician, and it seems that I'll soon get a small post as an organist. Then I'll be associated with the church again. I looked at the spines of the books and discovered titles in Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, as far as I could tell by the feeble light of the small table lamp. Meanwhile, my new acquaintance had lain down on the floor near the wall in the dark, and was doing something there. Come, he called after a while. Let's practice a little philosophy now. That is, let's shut up, lie on our stomachs, and think. Don't spoil anything. Whatever you got, don't spoil anything. I just thought, oh my god, I got it. I'm like, oh shit, don't spoil anything. Okay. He lit a match and set fire to papers and logs in the fireplace in front of which he was lying. The flames shot up high. He poked and fed the fire with extreme care. Hi, Migo. I lay down beside him on the worn-out carpet. He stared into the fire, which attracted me too, as we lay on our stomachs in silence for about an hour in front of the flickering wood fire, watching it flame and roar, collapse and curl, flicker away in the spurts, and finally brood on the fireplace floor as a quiet, sunken glow. The fire worship wasn't the dumbest thing ever invented, he murmured to himself at one point. Aside from that, neither of us said a word. With rigid eyes, I stared at the fire as I sank into dreams in silence, seeing forms in the smoke and images in the ashes. At one point, I became alarmed. My companion threw a small piece of resin into the fire. A small, narrow flame shot up, in which I saw the bird with the yellow sparrowhawk's head. Interesting. My companion threw a small piece of resin into the fire. A small, narrow flame shot up, in which I saw the bird with the gold-yellow sparrowhawk's head. In the dying glow of the fireplace, gold gleaming threads were combining into nets. Letters of the alphabet and images were appearing. Reminiscences of faces, animals, plants, worms, and snakes. Sorry, apparently the neighbor's dog is barking. When I awoke and looked at the other man, he was resting his chin on his two fists and staring devoutly and fanatically at the ashes. I must go now, I said quietly. All right, go. Till next time. As a reminder, there might be people in the chat that don't know about the story, so please, please, please don't spoil anything about BTS and connections or anything like that in case they don't know about the storyline, okay? Thank y'all. Okay. Yeah, you guys can like DM each other if you guys want to like talk to each other about the storyline. Please don't do it in the chat. Okay, I'm literally about to have to close that door because the neighbor's dog is barking. Can you guys hear the neighbor's dog barking? Do I need to close that? Hi, Jesse. Yeah, this is the, you know, in BTS Wings and Blood, Sweat, and Tears, in the Wings episodes, he quotes, he says like a quote before like everything, and in the middle of it, it's from this book. Okay, all right, I won't worry about the dog then. Okay, he didn't get up. Oh no, I must go now, I said quietly. All right, go, till next time. He didn't get up, and since the lamp was out, I had to grope my way painfully through the dark room and the dark corridors and stairs and out of the old enchanted house. In the street, I halted and looked up at the old house. There was no light in any window. A small brass sign gleamed in the light from the gas lamp in the front door. Pistorius head pastor, I read on it. It was only when back home, sitting alone after supper in my small room, that I realized I had learned nothing, either about Abraxas or Pistorius, that we had barely exchanged 10 words altogether. But I was very contented with my visit to him, and he had promised that next time he would play a truly exquisite piece of old organ music, a Passacaglia by Buxtehude. I'm assuming that's some sort of musician. Without my knowing it, the organist Pistorius had given me an introductory lesson when I lay beside him before the fireplace on the floor of his dreamy hermit's room. Looking into the fire had done me good. It had strengthened and confirmed inclinations that I had always possessed, but had never really cultivated. Gradually, I came to recognize them to some extent. Even as a small child, I had occasionally had a leaning toward looking at bizarre natural forms, not as an observer, but surrendering myself to their unique magic, their confused but profound language. Long, woody tree roots, veins of color in stones, patches of oil floating on water, cracks in glass, all such things had occasionally cast strong spell over me, especially water and fire, as well as smoke, clouds, dust, and most particularly the moving dots of color when I saw when I shut my eyes. In the days after my first visit to Pistorius, this began to occur to me again, because I noticed that a certain strengthening and joy, a heightening of my perception of self, which I had perceived ever since then, was due solely to my long staring into the open fire. It was oddly pleasurable and enriching to do that. Staring into a fire with a smile on your face. That reminds me of something else. Okay, and the water. To the few things I had learned so far on the way to my true aim in life, this new thing was now added. The contemplation of such shapes, the surrender of irrational, confused, rare natural forms, engenders in us a feeling that our own mind is in harmony with the will that gave rise to these forms. We soon feel the temptation to look on them as our own caprices, our own creations. We see the borderline between us and the nature tremble and dissolve, and we become acquainted with the mood in which we don't know whether the images on our retina are coming from external impressions or from within us. In no other way than through this practice do we discover so simply and easily how very creative we are, how much our soul always participates in the perpetual creation of the world. Rather, it's the same indivisible Godhead that is active in us and in nature, and if the outside world were to perish, any one of us would be capable of reconstructing it, because mountain and river, tree and leaf, roof and blossom, every form of nature has a pre-image inside us. It originates from the soul, whose nature is eternity, whose nature we don't know, but is generally revealed to us as the power of love and creativity. Only many years later did I find this observation confirmed in a book, namely in Leonardo da Vinci, who says in one place how good and deeply stimulating it is to look at a wall on which many people have spat. Seeing those stains on the damp wall, he had the same feeling Pistorius and I had in front of the fire. Staying in one place and deeply stimulatingly looking at a wall. That reminds me of something else. Okay. At our next meeting, the organist gave me an explanation. We always limit our personality too narrowly. We always count as pertaining to our person only what we recognize as individual differences that set us apart. But we're comprised of everything that comprises the world, each of us. And just as our body bears within it the lines of evolutionary descent, all the way back to the fish and even much further beyond that, in the same way our soul contains everything that has ever dwelt in human souls. All the gods, devils that ever existed, whether among the Greeks, Chinese, or Zulus, are all inside us. They exist there as possibilities, as wishes, as ways of escape. If mankind died out, except for a single half-witted, gifted child that had received no education, that child would rediscover the whole course of events. It would be able to produce again the gods, demons, Edens, positive and negative commandments, the Old and the New Testament. Fine, I objected, but then what comprises the worth of the individual? Why do we still strive for things when everything is already there within us? Good question. Stop right there, Pistorius shouted. There's a big difference between merely carrying the world inside you and knowing that you do. Oh my god, my nose, seriously? I feel like there's taco hair all over my face and in my nose. It's killing me. Okay. There's a big difference between merely carrying the world inside you and knowing that you do. A madman can produce ideas that resemble Plato's, and a pious little schoolboy in a Herrnhut Institute can creatively reconstruct profound mythological associations in his mind, ideas to be found in the Gnostics or Zoroaster, but he doesn't know he's doing it. He's a tree or a stone, at best an animal, just as long as he doesn't know that. But when the first spark of that knowledge glimmers, he becomes a human being. You certainly don't consider all the bipeds running around the street to be human beings merely because they walk upright and carry their young for 9 months. After all, you see how many of them are fish or sheep, worms or leeches, how many are ants, how many are bees. Now, each one of them has the potentiality of becoming human being, but only when he sees that potential. When he even learns to be conscious of it to some degree, does that potential belong to him? Our conversations were more or less of that type. They seldom offered me anything completely new or totally surprising, but all of them, even the most banal, hit the same spot in me with a steady, gentle hammer blow. They all helped me form my character. They all helped me strip dead skins off me, to crush eggshells, and after each one, I raised my head a little higher, a little more freely, until my yellow bird pushed its beautiful predator's head out of the shattered globe. Often we told each other our dreams. Pistorius knew how to interpret them. Right now I can remember a marvelous example. I had a dream in which I was able to fly, but in such a way that to some degree I was captured through the air by some mighty impetuous, that I couldn't control. Impetus, that I couldn't control. The sensation of that flight was uplifting, but soon it turned to fear when I found myself hurled into the dangerous heights involuntarily. Then I made the reliving discovery that I could regulate my rise and fall by holding my breath and releasing again. Oh, interesting. When I told him that, Pistorius said, "The impetus that makes you fly is the great store of humanity that each of us possesses. It's the feeling of interconnectedness with roots of all power, but we soon get alarmed by it. It's damn dangerous. And so most people are glad to give up flying. They prefer walking on the sidewalk, following the rules and regulations. But not you. You keep on flying, as a clever fellow should. And look, as you do, you discover the marvelous fact that you gradually become master of it, that in addition to the great general power that bears you aloft, a subtle small power of your own is added, an internal organ, a rudder. That's terrific. Without it, we'd be wafted away into the sky involuntarily, as madmen are, for example. They are endowed with deeper presentiments than the people on the sidewalk, but they have no key to it and no rudder, and they whiz away into the abyss. But you, Sinclair, you can pull it off. And how, I ask? I suppose you don't know yet. You do it by using a new organ, a breath regulator. And now you can see that your soul, deep down, isn't all that personal, because you didn't invent that regulator. It's not new, it's alone. It has existed for millennia. It's the organ of equilibrium that fish have, the air bladder. And in fact, there are still a few rare, conservative species of fish existent today, in which the air bladder is also a kind of lung, and under certain conditions that can actually be used for breathing. So they're precisely like the lungs you use as a flying bladder in your dream. He even brought me a book on zoology and showed me the names and pictures of those primitive fish. And with a peculiar thrill, I felt that the function from early evolutionary stages was alive within me. Interesting. Okay, we're on chapter 6, guys. My eyes are feeling a little crossed. That's okay. We'll get there. Okay, chapter 6. Jacob's fight with the angel. Yeah, take little small breaks, I know, right? Okay, let's do this. We got this. What I learned about Abraxas from the eccentric musician Pistorius, I cannot relate briefly. But the most important thing I learned from him was a further step on the path to myself. Around 18 at the time, I was an unusual young person, precocious in 100 ways, but very undeveloped and helpless in 100 others. When I had occasionally compared myself with others, I had often been proud and smug, but just as often depressed and humiliated. I had often thought of myself as a genius, often as half crazy. I couldn't imagine to share in the joys and activities of those my age, and I had often been consumed with self-reproaches and worries, as if I were hopelessly cut off from them, as if I were shut off from life. Pistorius, who was a full-fledged eccentric himself, taught me to keep up my courage and self-respect, but by constantly finding something of value in my words, dreams, fantasies, and ideas. By constantly taking them serious and discussing them earnestly, he set me an example. You told me, he said, that you loved music because it's not moralistic. All right, but you yourself mustn't be a moralist either. You shouldn't compare yourself with others. And if nature has made you a bat, you shouldn't try to turn yourself into an ostrich. You sometimes think you're peculiar. You reproach yourself for going other ways than most people. But you've got to get that out of your head. Look into the fire, look into the clouds, and as soon as your presentiments come and the voices in your soul begin to speak, surrender yourself to them, and don't start off by asking whether that suits or pleases your teacher, your father, or some god or other. If you do that, you'll ruin yourself. That way, you get on the sidewalk and you become a fossil. My friend, Sinclair, our God is named Abraxas. He is God and Satan. Both the bright world and the dark world are contained in him. Abraxas has no objections to any of your thoughts or any of your dreams. Never forget that. But he'll abandon you if you ever become faultless and normal. Then he'll abandon you and look for a new pot to cook his ideas in. Among all of my dreams, that obscure dream of love was the most loyal. I dreamt it over and over again. I walked beneath the heraldic bird into our old house. I wanted to draw my mother into my bosom, and in her place, I embraced that tall woman who was half masculine, half maternal. I was afraid of her, yet I was drawn to her by the most burning desire, and I could never tell my friend that dream. I held it back after revealing everything else to him. It was my cranny, my secret, my refuge. Whenever I was downcast, I asked Pistorius to play that Passacaglia by the old master Buxtehude. Then I sat in the dark church in the evening, lost in that strange, intimate music which seemed to be submerged in itself, to be listening to itself. Each time it soothed me and left me better prepared to acknowledge the voices in my soul. Sometimes we remained seated in the church for a while, after the organ tones had already died away, and we saw the dim light shine through the tall Gothic arches of the windows and become lost in the darkness. It sounds funny, Pistorius said, that I was once a divinity student and almost became a parson. But the error I then made was merely one of form. To be a priest is my vocation and my goal. But I became satisfied too soon, placing myself at Jehovah's disposal even before I knew Abraxas. Every religion is beautiful. Religion is soul, whether you take communion as a Christian or you make a pilgrimage to Mecca. Mecca? Yeah. Mesa? No, Mecca. In that case, I said, you might just as well have become a parson. No, Sinclair, no. I would have to lie. Our religion is practiced as if it weren't one. It behaves as if it were entirely rational. In a pinch, I could be a Catholic, but a Protestant clergyman? No. The handful of true believers, I know some, abide by the literal meaning. I couldn't tell them, for example, that for me, Christ is not an individual, but a hero, a myth, an enormous shadow in which mankind sees its own image cast onto the wall of eternity. And the rest, those who come to church to hear a wise saying, to fulfill a duty, to avoid being negligent, and so on. What was I supposed to tell them? Was I to convert them you think? But I don't want to. A priest isn't out for conversions. He wants to live among believers. He wants to live among only believers, people like himself. He wants to be the bearer and the spokesman of the emotion out of which we create our gods. He broke off, and then he continued. Our new faith, for which we now choose Abraxas' name, is beautiful, my friend. It's the best thing we have, but it's still in its infancy. Its wings haven't grown yet. Solitary religion is not yet truth. It has become the religion of the community. It must have rites and frenzy, festivals and mysteries. He sank into meditation. Can't mysteries also be celebrated by one person, very small, or a very small circle? I asked hesitantly. Yes, they can, he said, nodding his head. I've been celebrating them for some time. I have performed rites for which I'd have to go to prison for years if people knew about them. But I know it's still not the real thing. Suddenly he slapped me on the shoulder, making me start. My boy, he said forcefully, you too have mysteries. I know you must have had dreams you don't tell me about. I don't want to know them, but I tell you, live out those dreams. Play out your role in them. Build altars to them. That still won't be perfect, but it's a way. It remains to be seen whether we, you and I, and a few others will renew the world. But within ourselves, we must renew it daily. Otherwise, we're meaningless. Think it over. You're 18 years old, Sinclair. You don't chase after streetwalkers. You must have dreams of love, wishes for love. Perhaps they're of such kind that you're afraid of them. Don't be afraid. They're the best thing you have. You can believe me. I lost a lot by doing violence to my dreams of love when I was your age. No one should do that. If a person knows about Abraxas, he must no longer do that. He should be afraid of nothing and consider nothing taboo that the soul within us desires. I was frightened and objected. But a person can't just do everything that comes into his head. For instance, you mustn't kill someone because you can't stand him. He moved closer to me. Under certain circumstances, you can even do that. Only, it's usually a mistake. And I don't mean you should simply do anything that comes to mind. No. But those ideas, which make some good sense, shouldn't be made harmful by chasing them away and moralizing about them. Instead of crucifying yourself or anyone else, you can drink wine from a chalice with solemn thoughts and conceive of that as the mystery of the sacrifice while you're doing it. Even without such formal proceedings, you can treat your urges and so-called evil temptations with respect and love. Then they shall show their true sense, and they all make sense. Whenever you next get some really wild or sinful idea, Sinclair, when you feel like killing someone or committing some terrible, obscene act, then remember for a moment that it's Abraxas who is imagining that in your mind. The person you'd like to kill is never Mr. So-and-so. He's definitely just a disguise. When we hate a person, what we hate in his image is something inside ourselves. Whatever isn't inside us can't excite us. Interesting. Pistorius had never told me anything that affected me so deeply in my inmost recesses. I was unable to reply. But the thing that had touched me the most powerfully and oddly was the resemblance between that exhortation and speeches by Demian, which had stayed with me for years and years. They didn't know about each other, yet they were both telling me the same thing. The things we see, Pistorius said quietly, are the same things that are in us. The only reality is the one we have in us. That's why most people's lives are so unreal, because they consider the external images to be real and don't allow their own world within themselves to tell them anything. They can be happy that way, but when a person once knows the other way, he is no longer free to choose a path that most people follow. Sinclair, the path of the majority is easy. Ours is hard. Let's go. A few days later, I had waited for him in vain twice. I had come across him in the street late one evening, blown around a corner in the cold night wind, alone, stumbling, besotted with drink. I didn't want to call to him. He walked past me without seeing me. He was staring straight ahead with burning, lonely eyes, as if following an obscure call from the unknown. I followed him for the length of a street. He drifted along as if pulled by an invisible string, his pace fanatical but weak and confused like a ghost. Sadly, I returned home and back to my unfulfilled dreams. That's how he's renewing the world in himself, I thought, and yet at the same time, I felt that it was a cheap, moralistic thought. What did I know of his dreams? Perhaps in his intoxication, he was treading a surer path than I was with my anxiety. In the breaks between lessons, I had sometimes become aware that a classmate to whom I had never paid attention was trying to approach me. He was a short, weak-looking, skinny boy with thin, reddish-blonde hair, with something all in his own gaze and his behavior. One evening, as I arrived home, he was waiting in the street for me. He let me pass by him. Then he ran after me and stopped in front of my door. "Do you want something from me?" I asked. "I just want to talk with you," he said timidly. "Please walk a bit with me." I followed him and noticed that he was extremely agitated and filled with expectancy. His hands were trembling. "Are you a spiritualist?" he suddenly asked. Oh God, what is this kid's name? Nauer? No, Nauer, I said with a laugh. "No way. What put that in your head? But you are a theosophist." Again, no. Oh, don't be so secretive. I can tell very well there's something special about you. It's in your eyes. I firmly believe you can sort with spirits. I'm not asking out of idle curiosity, Sinclair. Oh no, I myself am a seeker. You know, and I'm so alone. Out with it, I said encouragingly. I don't know anything about spirits, of course. I live in my dreams, and that's what caught your attention. The other people live in dreams too, but not in their own. That's the difference. Yes, maybe so, he whispered. But what counts is the kind of dreams a person is living in. Have you ever heard of white magic? I had to say no. It's when you learn to control your own powers. You can become immortal and also cast spells. Haven't you ever indulged in such practices? When I asked with curiosity what those practices were, he acted mysterious at first until I turned to go, and then he came out with it. For example, if I want to fall asleep or concentrate, I do the following exercise. I think of something. For example, a word or a name or a geometric figure. I impress it onto my mind as hard as I can. I try to picture it in my head until I feel it's in there. Then I imagine it going down onto my neck and so on, until I'm entirely filled with it. Then I'm completely firm and nothing can disturb my repose anymore. I grasped his meaning to a degree, but I felt that he still had something else on his mind. He was oddly excited and hasty. I tried to make it easy for him to question me, and before long he revealed what he was really after. You practice continence too, don't you? He asked me anxiously. How do you mean? You mean sexually? Yes, for 2 years. I've been continent. Continent? I don't think that's... maybe I just don't know the meaning of that word. I'm like... yes, for 2 years. I've been continent ever since learning about the doctrine. Before that, I used to commit a vice, you know which one. And so, you've never been with a woman? Do they mean like... What the hell's the word when you... Abstinent? Is that what they're meaning? Does continent mean abstinence? I'm assuming that means the same thing based in the context of this sentence. For 2 years, I've been abstinent ever since learning about the doctrine. That would make more sense to me. Okay, I'm just going to say abstinent because continent is something on a globe. Okay. Okay. Obviously, there's different meanings of it. I just am not familiar with that one. So I'm going to go with abstinent. Okay. And so you've never been with a woman. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, seriously. I'm like, what the fuck is that? No, I said, I've never found the right one. But if you did find... Is that a globe? But if you did find the one you thought was right, would you sleep with her? Yes, naturally, if she had no objection, I said a little sarcastically. Oh, then you're on the wrong path. You can only develop your inner powers if you remain perfectly abstinent. So I've done it for 2 years. 2 years and a little over a month. It's so hard. Sometimes I can barely stand it any longer. Listen now, I don't believe in abstinence. I don't believe abstinence is so all-fired important. I know, he said defensively. That's what everyone says, but I didn't expect it from you. Whoever wants to travel the higher mental path must remain pure. Absolutely. We'll do it, but I don't understand why someone is more pure when he suppresses his sexual urges than anyone else is. Or are you able to eliminate sex from all your thoughts and dreams as well? He looked at me in despair. No, that's just it. My God, and I have to. At night, I have dreams that I can't even repeat to myself. Terrible dreams, you hear? I recalled what Pistorius had told me, but correct as I found his words to be, I couldn't pass them along. I couldn't give advice that I didn't stem from my own experience, advice I did not yet feel myself capable of following. I became taciturn and felt humiliated because someone was seeking advice from me and I had none to give him. I've tried everything now, Naur was lamenting as he stood there beside me. I've done all that can be done with cold water, with snow, with gymnastics and running, but nothing helps. Every night I wake up from dreams that are unthinkable. And the horrible thing is, when that happens, I gradually lose again everything I learned mentally. By now, I can barely manage to concentrate or put myself to sleep. Often I lie awake all night. I won't be able to go on like this much longer. If I finally can't fight the battle to the end, if I give in and make myself impure again, then I am worse than all the rest, those who never fought at all. Do you understand that, don't you? I nodded, but I couldn't add any words. He was beginning to bore me, and I got frightened at myself, seeing that his obvious distress and despair made no stronger impression on me. All I felt was, I can't help you. So there's nothing you can tell me, he finally said, exhausted and sad. Nothing at all? There just has to be a way. How do you manage it? I can't tell you anything now. In such matters, people can't help each other. No one helped me either. You have to meditate on your own needs, and then you must do whatever is in accord with your own real nature. Nothing else will help. If you can't find yourself, you won't find any spirits either. That's what I think. Disappointed and suddenly struck dumb, the little fellow looked at me. Then a sudden malice blazed up in his eyes, and he made a face at me and yelled furiously, "Oh, you're a fine saint, aren't you? You've got your vice too, I know. You act like a philosopher, but secretly you're hung up in some filth that I am, in the same filth that I am, and everybody is. You're a pig just like me. We're all pigs." Can you imagine someone just yelling that at you on the street? I went away and left him standing there. He took 2 or 3 paces after me, then he hung back, turned around, and ran away. I was sick with the feeling of sympathy and revulsion, and I couldn't get rid of that feeling until I was back in my little room and had arranged my handful of pictures around me. Surrendering to my own dreams with the most ardent warmth. Then my dream immediately recurred. About my doorway and its coat of arms, about my mother and the woman I didn't know. I saw the woman's features with such surreal clarity that on that very evening I began to draw her picture. When that drawing was finished, a few days later, I traced onto the paper in dreamlike 15-minute stints, as if unconsciously. I hung it up on my wall in the evening, moved my reading lamp in front of it, and stood before it as if facing a spirit whom I had to fight until a decision was reached. It was a face resembling the earlier one, resembling my friend Demian, but in some features resembling me as well. One eye was noticeably higher than the other. The direction of their gaze passed over and beyond me, in the rigidity of concentration, filled with destiny. I stood before it and turned cold to the heart from inner exertion. I questioned the picture. I made accusations against it. I caressed it. I prayed to it. I called it mother. I called it beloved. I called it whore and trollop. I called it Abraxas. I feel like that sounds familiar too. Meanwhile, yeah, okay, I thought that sounded familiar. Meanwhile, things that Pistorius, or was it Demian, had told me came to mind. I couldn't recall when they had been said, but I thought I was hearing them again. They concerned Jacob's fight with the angel of God and Jacob's words, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The painted face in that lamplight changed each time I invoked it. It became bright and radiant. It became dark and gloomy. Its pallid eyelids fell, covering glazed eyes, or opened again, while the eyes flashed and gleamed. It was a woman, a man, a girl, and a child. An animal. It dissolved into a blot and then grew large and clear again. Finally, obeying a strong inner call, I closed my eyes and now saw the image inside me. Stronger and more powerful, I wanted to kneel down before it, but it was so firmly inside me that I could no longer separate it from myself, as if it had become my pure ego. Then I heard a heavy, muffled roar, like that of a spring storm, and I trembled with an indescribably new feeling of anxiety and experience. Stars flared up and went out before my eyes. Memories, reaching back to my earliest, most completely forgotten childhood, and even back to my prior existences and early stages of evolution, flowed past me in throngs. But the memories, which seemed to be repeating my whole life and penetrating in its deepest secrets, didn't stop yesterday and today. They went further, mirroring the future, tearing me away from today and into new life forms, whose images were bright and dazzling, but none of which I was later able to recall clearly. During the night, I awoke from a deep sleep. I was dressed, stretched out across the bed. I turned on the light with the feeling that I must remember something important. I recalled nothing from the previous hours. I turned on the light. My memory came back gradually. I looked for the picture. It was no longer hanging on the wall, but it wasn't on the table either. Then I thought I could dimly recall having burned it, or I had merely dreamt about burning it while holding it and then eating the ashes. That sounds familiar too. Interesting. I was driven by a great pulsating unrest. I put on my hat, walked through the house and onto the street, as if by compulsion. I walked on and on through the streets and across squares as if blown onward by a storm. Stopped to listen in front of my friend's church, now dark. Sought and sought, not knowing what, in the obscurity of my impulse. I walked through a suburb of bordellos, where some lights were still burning here and there. Farther out, there were construction sites and piles of bricks partially covered with gray snow. As I drifted through that wilderness like a sleepwalker propelled by an unknown force, I recalled the construction site in my hometown into which my tormentor, Cromer, had once pulled me for our first settlement of accounts. A similar site was located here in front of me in the gray night. The blackness of its empty doorway gaped at me. I felt drawn inside. I wanted to resist and stumbled over and stand over the sand and rubbish. The urge was stronger and I had to go in. Over boards and shattered bricks, I reeled into the desired space, which had a dismal smell of damp and cold stones. A heap of sand there formed a patch of light gray. Aside from that, everything was dark. Then a horrified voice called for me. For God's sake, Sinclair, where did you come from? And beside me a person loomed out of the darkness, a short, thin young fellow, like a spirit, and while my hair was still standing on end, I recognized my classmate, Nauer. How did you get here? He asked, as if mad with excitement. How could you find me? I didn't understand. I wasn't looking for you, I said, stupefied. Every word was an effort for me, painfully passing my dead, heavy, seemingly frozen lips. He stared at me. Weren't looking? No, I felt drawn here. Did you call me? You must have called me. What are you doing here? It's the middle of the night. He convulsively threw his skinny arms around me. Yes, night. Morning must be coming soon. Oh, Sinclair, you didn't forget me. Can you forgive me? For what? Oh, I was so hateful, you know. It was only then that I remembered our conversation. That had been 4 or 5 days earlier. Had that been 4 or 5 days earlier, I felt as if a lifetime had gone by since then, but now I suddenly knew everything. Not only what had passed between us, but also why I had come there and what Nauer had intended to do out there. So you wanted to take your life, Nauer? He shivered with cold and fear. Yes, I did. I did not know whether I could have done it. I wanted to wait until morning. I led him out into the open. The first horizontal rays of daylight were shining indescribably cold and listless in the gray sky. I led the boy by the arch of the arm for a stretch. A voice came from me saying, now you're going home and you won't say a thing to anyone. You've been following the wrong path, and we're not pigs as you think. We're human beings. We create gods and fight with them, and they bless us. We continued walking in silence, then separated. When I got home, it was daylight. The best thing those days in they still won't say the name of the town. The best thing those days in still had in store for me was the hours I spent with Pistorius at the organ or in front of the fireplace. Together we read a Greek text about Abraxas. He read aloud to me portions of a translation of the Vedas and taught me how to pronounce the sacred syllable Om. Yet it wasn't these scholarly accomplishments that fostered my inner life. Rather, it was just the opposite. What benefited me was my further progress in finding myself, my increasing confidence in my own dreams, ideas, and presentiments, my increasing knowledge of the power I carried inside me. I got along with Pistorius in every way. All I needed to think was to think about him hard, and I could be sure of a visit or a message from him, just as the case had been with Demian. I could ask him something even if he wasn't present. I just had to imagine him clearly and address my questions to him in the form of intensive thoughts. Then all the psychic force I had expended on the question flowed back to me as the reply. Only it wasn't the person of Pistorius that I had imagined or that of Max Demian. It was the picture I had dreamed and painted, the androgynous dream image of my Demian that I had to invoke. Now it no longer lived merely in my dreams or painted on the paper, but inside of me, as an ideal and a heightening of myself. The relationship I had now formed with the failed suicide Nauer was peculiar and sometimes funny. Since that night in which I had been sent to him, he was devoted to me like a loyal servant or a dog. He tried to link his life to mine, and he followed me blindly. He came to me with the oddest questions and wishes. He wanted to see spirits and learn Kabbalah. He didn't believe me when I assured him that I knew nothing of all those matters. He thought I possessed every kind of power, but the strange thing was that he often came to me with this odd, stupid questions precisely when there was a knot in me that had to be untied, and his whimsical notions and requests often supplied me with the clue and the impetus for untying the knot. I often lost patience with him and diminished him imperiously, but I nevertheless perceived this. He too was sent to me. Even from him I got back twofold. I got back twofold everything I gave him. He too was a guide for me, or rather a path. The crazy books and articles which he brought me, and in which he was seeking his salvation, taught me more than I could discern at the moment. Later on, this Nauer disappeared from my path without my being aware of it. A decisive confrontation with him wasn't necessary, but with Pistorius it was. Toward the end of my school days in St. Blank, I had another peculiar experience with that friend. Even innocuous people are hardly spared from coming into conflict, one time or more in their life, with the lovely virtues of piety and gratitude. Everyone must at some time take the step that separates him from his father, from his teachers. Everyone must take a little of the toughness of solitude, even though most people can't stand much of it, and soon knuckle under again. I hadn't parted from my parents in their world, in the bright world of my beautiful childhood, in a violent battle, but I had grown more distant from them and more of a stranger to them slowly and almost imperceptibly. I was sorry about it. When I visited them back home, I often created bitter hours for me, but it didn't affect me in my vitals. It was bearable. Hi, Faustine. But in situations where we have made the gift of our love and veneration, not out of long familiarity, but out of our most personal impulses, where we have been disciples and friends from the depth of our heart, in such cases, it's bitter and frightening moment when we suddenly seem to realize that the principal current within us is determined to carry us away from the person we love. Then, every thought that rejects our friend and teacher turns its poisoned barb against our own bosom. Then each defensive blow we strike hits our own face. Then anyone who imagined he was harboring a valid morality in his heart feels the words disloyalty and ingratitude looming up like catcalls and stigmas. Then one's frightened heart flees fearfully back to the cherished valleys of childhood virtues, and can't believe that this break too must be made, that this bond too must be severed. Slowly, in the course of time, a feeling inside me had come to oppose my unconditional acceptance of my friend Pistorius as a guide. My friendship with him, his advice, his consolation, his proximity were what I experienced in the most important months of my life as a young man. God had spoken to me through him, and from his lips my dream had come back to me, explained and interpreted. He had bestowed on me the courage to find myself, and now, I gradually felt increasing resistance to him. I heard too much in his words of an instructive nature. I felt that he had a firm understanding of one part of me only. There was no argument or scene between us, no break, and not even a squaring of accounts. I merely spoke a single, actual, harmless phrase to him, but nevertheless, at that very moment, an illusion we had shared was shattered into multicolored shards. Something being shattered into multicolored shards. It sounds interesting as well. And I like how they used the word stigma a little while ago. Also interesting. Hold on a second. My neck is like stiff from like reading. 2 seconds. Okay. Continue. For some time, the foreboding had oppressed me. It became a distinct feeling one Sunday. Reflection much? It became a distinct feeling one Sunday in his old schoolery room. We were lying on the floor in front of the fire, and he was speaking about mystery cults and religious forms that he was studying and meditating on, and whose purposeful future occupied his thoughts. But to me, all it seemed more of an interesting curiosity than something significant for one's life. I heard it in scholarship. I heard it in a weary search amid the ruins of worlds gone by. And all at once I felt repelled by this whole genre, by this cult of mythologies, by this jigsaw puzzle of handed-down forms of faith. Pistorius, I suddenly said, with a malice that surprised even me, as it burst forth terrifyingly, you ought to tell me a dream again sometime, a real dream you had at night. What you're saying now is so damn antiquarian. He had never heard me talk like that, and in that very moment, I myself realized in a flash with shame and fright that the arrow I had shot at him, striking him to the heart, had been taken from his own arsenal, that I had now maliciously hurled at him in a more pointed form his own self-reproaches, which I had occasionally heard him utter ironically. He felt it all at once and fell silent that very moment. I looked at him with fear in my heart and saw him turn frightfully pale. After a long, difficult pause, he placed fresh wood on the fire and said quietly, "You're quite right, Sinclair. You're a bright fellow. I'll spare you the antiquarian stuff." He was speaking very calmly, but I could detect the pain of his injury. What had I done? I was close to tears. I wanted to turn to him cordially. I wanted to ask his forgiveness, to assure him of my love and tender gratitude. I thought some touching words, but I couldn't utter them. I remained lying there, looking into the fire in silence, and he was silent too. And so we lay there, and the fire burned down and collapsed. And as each yelping flame died away, I felt something beautiful and intimate dimming and scattering like sparks with no possibility of return. "I'm afraid you've misunderstood me," I finally said in a very strained way and in a dry, hoarse voice. The stupid, meaningless words passed my lips as if mechanically, as if I were reading aloud from a serialized novel in the newspaper. "I understand you perfectly well," said Pistorius quietly. "And you're right," he paused. Then he continued slowly, "as far as any person can be with no regard to someone else." "No, no, no," a voice in me called. "I am wrong." But I couldn't say a thing. I knew that my single brief phase has pointed out to him an essential weakness, his distress and wound. I had touched on the spot where he had to distrust himself. His idea was antiquarian. He was a seeker into the past. He was a romantic. And I suddenly felt deep down precisely what Pistorius had been to me and had given me. He couldn't be to himself or give himself. He had led me along a path that had to go beyond even him, the guide, and leave him behind. Only God knows how a person comes to say such things. I hadn't meant it unkindly. I hadn't had any foreboding of a catastrophe. I had uttered something that at the moment of utterance I myself wasn't all aware of. I had yielded to the temptation of a small remark, a little humorous, a little malicious, and it had turned into something fateful. I had committed a small, thoughtless act of rudeness, and for him it had become judgment. Oh, how I wished at the time that he would get angry, defend himself, yell at me. He did none of that, and I had to do it all myself in my own mind. He would have smiled if he had been able to. His inability to do so showed me most clearly how deeply I had hurt him. And by accepting so silently the blow that I, his impudent and ungrateful pupil, had dealt him, by remaining silent and indicating that I was in the right, by acknowledging my words to be the voice of fate, Pistorius made me hate myself. He made my thoughtlessness 1,000 times worse. When I struck, I thought I was hitting a strong man capable of defending himself, but it was a quiet, suffering man, unarmed, who surrendered in silence. For quite a while we remained lying in front of the dying fire, in which every glowing figure, every curling rod of ashes reminded me of happy, beautiful, rich hours, and increased more and more my debt of obligation to Pistorius. Finally, I could no longer stand it. I got up and left. For some time I stood in front of the door of his room, for some time on the dark stairs, for some time even in front of the house, waiting for him to come and follow me. Then I proceeded onward, walking for hours and hours through the town and its suburbs, park and forest, until evening. And then, for the first time, I felt the mark of Cain on my forehead. That's interesting. A little bit full circle right there. Only gradually did I begin reflecting on what happened. All my thoughts had the intention of accusing myself and defending Pistorius. Wow, I just barely joined. No, I'm going to be here for a little while longer. I've only been on for like an hour and a half, so I probably have at least an hour and a half left. Okay, only gradually did I begin reflecting on what had happened. All my thoughts had the intention of accusing myself and defending Pistorius, and they all ended with the opposite. 1,000 times I was ready to regret my hasty words and take them back, but they had nevertheless been true. It was only then that I succeeded in understanding Pistorius, in constructing his entire dream before my eyes. That dream had been to be a priest, to proclaim the new religion, to offer forms of edification, love, and worship, to set up new symbols, but that was beyond his powers. It wasn't his office. He dwelt too lovingly on the past. His knowledge of what had once occurred was too precise. He knew too much about Egypt, India, Mithra, Abraxas. His love was attached to images that the world had already seen. And at the same time, he surely knew in his mind that those things had to be the new and different. And in the same time, he knew, what did I just read? Hold on. His love was attached to images that the world had already seen. And at the same time, he surely knew in his mind that those new things had to be new and different, that they must gush up out of the fresh soil and not be drawn from collections and libraries, as if from some old well. His office, perhaps, was to help guide people to themselves, as he had done for me. To give them something altogether novel, their new gods, was not his office. And at that point, the realization suddenly burned me like a searing flame. For each person there was an office, but not for nobody was there one that was permitted to choose for himself, to define and to fill according to his own wishes. It was wrong to desire new gods. It was totally wrong and to try to give the world anything. There was no duty for enlightened people, none except this, to seek themselves, to become certain of themselves, and to grope forward along their own path, wherever it might lead. I was deeply affected by that, and for me, that was the profit from that experience. I had often played with images of the future. I had dreamt of roles that might be meant for me as a poet, perhaps, or as a prophet, or as a painter, or whatever else. That was all meaningless. I didn't exist to write poetry, to preach sermons, to paint pictures. Neither I nor anyone else existed for that purpose. All of that merely happened to a person along the way. Everyone had only one true vocation, to find himself. Let him wind up as a poet or a madman, as a prophet or a criminal. That wasn't his business. In the long run, it was irrelevant. His business was to discover his own destiny, and not just any destiny, and to live it totally and undividedly. Anything else was just a half measure, an attempt to run away, an escape back to the idea of the masses, an adaptation, fear of one's own nature. Fearsome and sacred, the new image rose up before me. I had sensed it 100 times. Perhaps I had already... I lost my spot. Fearsome and sacred, the new image rose up before me. I had sensed it 100 times. Perhaps I had already enunciated it, but now I was experiencing it for the first time. I was a gamble of nature, a throw of the dice into an uncertain realm, leading perhaps to something new, perhaps to nothing, and to let this throw from the primordial depths take effect, to feel its will inside myself and adopt it completely as my own will. That alone was my vocation, that alone. I already experienced plenty of loneliness. Now I sensed that even deeper loneliness existed, and that was inescapable. I made no attempt to patch things up with Pistorius. We remained friends, but our relationship had changed. Once only did we speak about it, actually. It was only that he did so. He said, I have the desire to become a priest, as you know. I wanted most of all to become the priest of the new religion that we have so many presentiments of. I'll never be able to, I know that, and I've known it for a long time, though I never fully admitted it to myself. Well, I'll perform other priestly duties, perhaps as an organist, perhaps in other ways, but I must always be surrounded by something I feel to be beautiful and holy. Organ music and mystery cult, symbol and myth. I need it and I won't give it up. That's my weakness. Because I know at times, Sinclair, I know sometimes that I shouldn't have such desires, that they represent a luxury and a weakness. It would be grander and it would be more proper if I quite simply placed myself at the disposal of fate, making no claims. But I can't. It's the only thing I can't do. Maybe you'll be able to someday. It's difficult. It's the only really difficult thing that exists, my young friend. I often dreamed of it, but I can't do it. It terrifies me. I can't stand there so completely naked and alone. I, too, am a poor, weak dog that needs a little warmth and food and would occasionally like to feel the nearness of its own kind. The person who truly wants nothing except his destiny to no longer, to accept his destiny. The person who truly wants nothing except his destiny no longer has others of his own kind. He stands completely alone and has only the chill of outer space around him. You know, that's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? Yeah. You know that Jesus in the garden, that's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. I think that's how you say it. Whatever. There have been, hopefully that word doesn't repeat again. There have been martyrs who gladly let themselves be crucified, but even they were no heroes and weren't liberated. Even they wanted something that they had to come to love. That was familiar to them from home. I feel like I am getting cross-eyed and I'm losing my place. Give me 2 seconds to like take a little break because I am so like cross-eyed right now and I keep losing my place of where I'm at in the book. Just give me 2 seconds and I'll pick back up at that sentence. How are you guys doing? You guys well? Dance break. Oh, my shoulders keep getting tense. I don't know why. Hope I'm not putting you guys to sleep. Apparently, I put Caitlin to sleep twice last time I was reading. She was listening to me reading, and then she fell asleep. And then I'm getting confused, and yet things are connecting. I feel the same way. Like, I feel very confused by a lot of things, but yet I'm finding connections with a lot of things, too. So, and I think we're probably just very confused because not everything in this book is going to connect. It's just not going to, you know. So maybe that's why we're kind of confused because we're trying to make connections that aren't always there. So maybe that's also why we're a little bit confused. But yeah, it's definitely very like it's a heavy read. It's not something like light and easy. Like it's definitely I'm eating soup and listening to you read. Yay! But yeah, so yeah, it's tricky. Also seeing things with persona now too. Yeah. Yeah, and if anybody wants to like DM me with ideas or thoughts of stuff that I've said in the book that you're thinking of or that might make sense to you or that maybe I might want to know for when we do start reacting to the Wings episodes, point that out to me. If I seem like I might have missed a connection or something, point that out to me. Okay. You guys were talking, like, you guys were, like, on something when they were sitting by the fire and looking at the fire and seeing symbols in the flames. You guys were like, oh, and I'm trying to, like, rack my brain as, like, what could that be? What could that be? What could that be? And not a lot. I mean, a little bit was coming to mind, but not a lot of it. Your cat just sliced your finger open. Why is your cat clawing you? But she's so cute, so it's okay. Anyway, okay. But yeah, so if you guys, whatever you guys think you might have come up with or what you might have connected that maybe I hadn't, just like DM me and mention that to me so that I can read that and kind of figure it all out. I really feel like I'm like cross-eyed. All right, let's pick back up where we left off. Hopefully I can read again. Okay, let's do this. She's a little shit. Yep. There have been martyrs who gladly let themselves be crucified, but even they were no heroes and weren't liberated. Even they wanted something that they had come to love, that was familiar to them from home. They had models to follow, they had ideals. The person who desires nothing else but destiny no longer has either models or ideals, nothing dear to him, nothing to console him, and that is the right path to follow. People like you and me are really alone, or really lonely. It's true, but we still have one another. We still have the secret satisfaction of being different, of rebelling, of desiring the unusual. That too must fall by the wayside if a person wants to follow the path to its end. He mustn't even desire to be a revolutionary, a role model, or a martyr. It's beyond imagining. Yes, it was beyond imagining, but it could be dreamed, it could be anticipated, and it could be sensed. A few times I had an inkling of when I found an hour of complete calm. Then I looked into myself and into the wide open eyes of my fateful image. They could be full of wisdom, they could be full of madness, they could radiate love or deep malice. It made no difference. A person wasn't allowed to choose any of that. He wasn't allowed to want anything. He was only allowed to want himself, his own destiny. Pistorius had served me as a guide for a stretch of path that led up to this point. In those days, I ran around like a blind man, and a storm roared in me. Every step I took spelled danger. I saw nothing but the precipitous darkness in front of me, and in which all paths I had previously taken petered out and submerged. And in my mind, I saw the image of the guide who resembled Demian, and in whose eyes my destiny lay. I wrote on a piece of paper, "One guide has left me. I'm completely in the dark. I can't take a step by myself. Help me." I wanted to send it to Demian, but I didn't. Every time I wanted to, it looked silly and pointless. But I knew that brief prayer by heart and often recited it to myself. It accompanied me at all times. I began to sense the meaning of prayer. My years of secondary school were over. I was to take a trip during summer vacation. My father had come up with the idea, and then I was to go to university, to which faculty I didn't know. I was granted a semester in the philosophy faculty. I would have been just as contented with any other. So, that is the last chapter. We are on Lady Eve. Ooh, we're going into Lady Eve. Interesting. Okay, so, interesting. So, Eve. So in that chapter, he met another guy who was very kind of similar to Demian, but not quite. This guy could lead him to a certain point, but then it was almost like he reached further beyond that point than this guy could. And it's almost like he outgrown the thoughts and ideas. Yeah, he surpassed him. Like he outgrown the thoughts and ideas that he had, and it's almost like it's almost like the what am I trying to fucking say? Almost like the friendship wasn't benefiting him any longer in a way. I know that's super crazy and selfish to say because it's kind of fucked up, but that's kind of what it was, you know, in a way. Other than just the company of another person, the learning and growing part of their friendship was no longer beneficial towards him. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Interesting. Listening to English, reading in German, an interesting experience. Yeah. Okay. So, do I need to recap on anything else at this point? I think we're good. Did I miss anything? I feel like I understand everything. I feel like that was just a really, really long-winded way to say that he met someone that reminded him a lot of Demian and taught him a lot of things, but he outgrew him and still longed for the teachings of Demian. Yeah? Does that sound about right? Crickets. Yes. Thank you. Okay, someone answered me. Holy shit. Okay, sounds good to me. You guys are like, sounds good to me. Oh, it's funny. Okay, so that was a very long chapter for something I just summed up in like a sentence. Okay, let's continue on. Very interesting here. Lady Eve, chapter 7. We only have 2 chapters left, guys. Woohoo. We are almost through this. Nauer, or whatever his name was also a bit odd. Yes, he was a very odd boy. it was really cool that he happened to be there in the moment that he was needed, though. And he saved a life because of it, which was really, really cool. That he didn't know why he was drawn to that place, but he was just drawn to that place, and by being drawn to that place, he ended up saving a life, which is really, really cool. You know, people say like, oh, you were in the right place at the right time, or you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, that sort of thing. But they're saying in the book that like there is no such thing as, oh, right place at the right time. Oh, Stain, oh my god. That is for a whole other channel, which I know we've got to figure that out. I know we got to figure out the Say What After Dark. I know. But what was I saying? Yeah, so in the book they were like basically saying that there isn't necessarily a such thing as the right place at the right time. You are supposed to be where you were meant to be in that moment. So it's not just a coincidence. Oh, it just happened to be in the right place at the right time. It's like, no, you were meant to be in that place. It's not just a coincidence or a by chance happening. Okay. Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Oh God, wait, does that Hobie edit have anything to do with? Because you need to DM me that. Okay, so we're gonna continue on. Okay, so chapter 7, Lady Eve. Let me take a sip of water first. That's hilarious, Faustine. You need to link me because that's hilarious. Okay. During vacation, I paid a visit to the house in which Max Demian had lived with his mother years before. An old lady was walking in the garden. I spoke to her and learned that the house was hers. I asked about the Demian family. She remembered them well, but she didn't know where they were living at the time. Since she noticed my interest, she invited me into the house, where she found a leather-bound album and showed me a photo of Damian's mother. I could scarcely remember her anymore. But when I now looked at that little portrait, my heart stood still. It was my dream image. There it was, the tall, almost masculine female figure resembling her son, with the traces of motherhood, traces of severity, traces of deep passion, beautiful and alluring, beautiful and unapproachable, Damian and mother, destiny and beloved, it was she. Dun dun dun! That's who it was the whole time! That's the mystery to be solved. That's why it was so familiar to him, yet not familiar. Interesting. My nose itches still. I swear to God. Taco rubbed up against my face before I started this, and now my nose is just going crazy. A wild feeling of the miraculous ran through me when I learned in that way that my dream image lived and existed on Earth. There really was a woman who looked like that, who bore the features of my destiny. Where was she? Where? And she was Damian's mother. Shortly thereafter, I set out on my trip, a strange trip. I rode uncertainly from place to place, pursuing each and every new idea, constantly searching for that woman. There were days when every figure I saw reminded me of her, hinted at her, resembled her, lured me through the streets of unfamiliar cities, through railroad stations, onto trains, as if in complicated dreams. There were other days when I realized how futile my search was. Then I would sit idly somewhere in a park, in a hotel garden, in a waiting room, looking inside myself, trying to vivify the image within me. But it had now been scared off and was hard to capture. I was never able to sleep. It was only on train rides through unknown landscapes that I would doze off for 15 minutes at a time. Once in Zurich, a woman set her sights on me, a pretty, somewhat shapeless female. I barely noticed her and walked by as if she didn't exist. I would sooner have died on the spot than have taken up with another woman for even an hour. I felt that my destiny was drawing me onward. I felt that fulfillment was near, and I was crazy with impatience and not being able to do anything about it. Once at a railroad station, I think it was in Innsbruck, I saw at the window of a train just pulling out a figure that reminded me of her, and I was miserable for days. And suddenly the figure appeared to me again in a dream at night. I woke up with the embarrassed, empty feeling of futility of my chase, and I took the next train back home. A few weeks later, I enrolled in the University of H. Why doesn't he put names of things? See? It just says University of H. He doesn't actually, like, why don't you put names of things? I'm going to call it the University of Blank, just like I called it the Saint Blank town or whatever. Okay, where was I? A few weeks later, I enrolled in the University of Blank. Everything disappointed me. The lecture, maybe, yeah. The lecture course on the history of philosophy that I attended was just as spiritless and mechanical as the activities of the young students. Everything was so routine, everyone behaved like everyone else, and the flush of merriment on their boyish faces looked so depressingly vacuous and ready-made. But I was free. My whole day was at my disposal. I lived in a quiet, pretty place nestled in the odd old walls outside of town. I had a few volumes of Nietzsche on my nights. That's German. Night. Why am I speaking like that? I don't know. How do you pronounce that? Isn't someone German in this chat right now? I have some of you guys are German. How do you say that? And why did I want to go night? I was pronouncing it. Oh my god, what's wrong with me? Niettzsche. Night. Kind of, but there's an S in there, and there's an E. Nietzsche? Nietzsche? I don't think is it Nietzsche? Yeah, Nietzsche. Night, isn't it N-I-E-T? How do you pronounce N-I-E-T? It's a psychiatrist. Thank you, because I didn't know what the heck this was. Okay, so Nietzsche? Okay, whatever. I had a few volumes of his books. Oh my god, there's a quote on the wall at the end of The Blood, Sweat, and Tears by him. Oh. I knew the quote on the wall at the end of The Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I didn't know it was by him. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Nietzsche? Okay, that's cool. Okay, I lived in a quiet, pretty place nestled in the old walls outside of town, and I had a few volumes of that guy's books on my table. I lived with him, feeling the solitude of his soul and sensing the fate that drove him on implacably? Is that supposed to be implacably? Implacably? I swear there might be spelling errors in this. I'm just saying. Unless I'm just dumb and I don't know what certain words mean. That's very possible. I suffered along with him and was overjoyed to know that there had been a man who had followed his own path so relentlessly. Late one evening, I was sauntering through town in the blowing autumn wind, and I heard the student glee clubs singing in the taverns. Through the open windows, clouds of tobacco smoke drifted out, and in a dense outpouring, the singing loud and firm, but uninspired and lifelessly uniform. I stood at a street corner listening from the two taverns. The ritually performed jollity of youth emerged into the night. Everywhere a sense of community, everywhere a squatting together, everywhere a shuffling off of destiny, and an escape into the warm togetherness of the herd. Behind me, two men were walking slowly. I heard a fragment of their conversation. "Isn't it exactly like the bachelor's lodge in the primitive village?" one of them said. "Everything is the same. Even tattoos are still in fashion. You see, this is young Europe." The voice sounded oddly admonitory to me, familiar. I followed those two down the dark street. One was Japanese, small and well-dressed. When he stood under a street lamp, I saw his smiling, yellow face gleaming. Then the other one spoke. "Well, it's probably no better with you in Japan. People who don't run after the herd are rare everywhere. Even here, there are a few." Each word penetrated me with joyful alarm. I knew the speaker. It was Demian. Through the windy night, I followed him in the Japanese down the dark streets, listening to their conversations and enjoying the sound of Damian's voice. It had its old timbre. It had its fine old certainty and calm. It still had power over me. It was everything was all right now. I had found him. Oh my god, he found him! Sorry. Hi, how are you? Oh, that's okay. You can, watch it later. At the end of a suburban street, the Japanese said goodnight and unlocked a house door. Demian started back the way he had come. I had halted and was awaiting him in the middle of the street, my heart pounding. I saw him come towards me, erect with a springy step, wearing a brown slicker, a thin walking stick hooked over one arm. Without modifying his even pace, he came right up to me, took off his hat, and showed me the same old bright face with the determined mouth and peculiar brightness on his broad forehead. Demian, I exclaimed. He held out his hand to me. So there you are, Sinclair. I've been waiting for you. Did you know I was here? I didn't know exactly, but I was hoping for it firmly. I didn't see you until this evening. In fact, you were following us the whole time. Then you recognized me right off? Naturally. To be sure, you've changed. But you have the mark, don't you? The mark? What kind of mark? We used to call it the mark of Cain, if you can still recall. It's our mark. You've always had it. That's why I became your friend. But now it's more distinct. I didn't know, or actually I did, once I painted that picture of you, Demian, and I was amazed to find that it looked like me too. Was that the mark? It was. I'm so glad you're back. My mother will be happy too. I got frightened. Your mother, is she here? But she doesn't know me. Oh, she knows about you. She'll recognize you even if I don't tell her who you are. It's been a long time since you sent any news about yourself. Oh, I often wanted to write, but I couldn't. For some time I felt that I'd surely find you again soon. I've been waiting for it every day. He linked arms with me, and we walked together. Calm radiated from him and permeated me. Soon we were chatting, just as in the past. We recalled our school days, our confirmation classes, and even that unfortunate meeting during vacation. The only thing we didn't discuss, even now, was the earliest and strongest bond between us, that business with Franz Cromer. Unexpectedly, we were in the midst of strange, premonitory conversations. Following up that talk between Demian and the Japanese, we had spoken about student life, and from there had gone on to other topics that seemed very remote. But as Demian spoke, it all came together in a tight connection. He talked about the European spirit and the keynote of the era. Everywhere, he said, togetherness and the herd instinct were prevalent, but freedom and love were nowhere to be found. All the sense of community from student societies and glee clubs all the way up to the national states was a compulsive form. It was a community based on anxiety, on fear, on confusion, and was inwardly rotten, old, and close to collapse. Community, Demian said, is a fine thing, but the type we see blossoming all over isn't true community. It will originate anew out of the knowledge that the individuals have of one another, and for a while it will transform the world. The kind of community we have now is merely herd instinct. People run to one another for shelter because they're afraid of one another. Capitalists stick together, workers stick together, scholars stick together. And why are they afraid? A person is afraid only when he isn't at one with himself. They're afraid because they have never accepted themselves. A community consisting exclusively of people afraid of the unknown in themselves. They all feel that the rules they live by are no longer valid, that they are following outdated commandments, neither their religious nor their morality. Nothing is suited to what we need. For a century and more, Europe has done nothing but study and build factories. They know exactly how many grams of powder it takes to kill someone, but they don't know how to pray to God. They don't even know how to be contented for an hour at a time. Just take a look at students' taverns like these, or even a pleasure resort that rich people go to. Hopeless. My dear Sinclair, no serenity can come from any of that. These people who rub elbows so anxiously are filled with fear and filled with malice. None of them trust anyone. They cling to ideals that no longer count, and they cast stones at everyone who proclaims a new one. I foresee confrontations. They'll come, believe me, they'll come soon. Naturally, they won't improve the world. Whether the workers kill the factory owners or Russia and Germany shoot at each other, that will only mean a change of ownership. But it won't all be for nothing. It will show clearly just how worthless today's ideals are. There will be a clearing out of Stone Age gods. This world, as it is now, wants to die. It wants to perish, and it will. And what will become of us then? I asked. Us? Oh, maybe we'll perish too. Even people like us can be killed, but that won't eliminate us. The will of the future will gather around whatever we leave behind, or around all of those who survive. The will of mankind will show itself, that will which for some time our Europe has drowned out with its fairground spiel about technology and science. And then it will be seen that the will of mankind is never the same as that of our current communities, the states and the nations, the organizations and the churches. Rather, nature's intentions for man are inscribed in individuals, in you and me. They were inscribed in Jesus and in Nietzsche's, that guy. There will be room for these currents, only the important ones, and naturally they may take on a different aspect daily, when the communities of today collapse. Late at night we halted in front of a garden by the river. This is where we live, said Demian. Come see us soon. We're expecting you eagerly. Hold on, my hand needs to, my hand holding the book was getting cramps. Okay. Happily, I made my long way home through the night, which had grown chilly. Here and there, homebound students were noisily staggering through the town. I had often observed the contrast between their funny style of merriment and my own solitary life, often with the feeling I was missing something, often sarcastically, but never yet had felt as I did now, calmly and with secret strength. How little that concerned me, how distant and bygone that world was to me. I recalled officials in my hometown, elderly, dignified gentlemen who clung to the memories of college years they had boozed away as if they were souvenirs of a blissful paradise, and who celebrated the same sort of cult of vanished freedom of their student days that poets or other romantics devote to their children. It's the same all over. All over, people were seeking freedom and happiness somewhere behind themselves, out of the sheer fear of being reminded of their own responsibilities and being admonished to travel their own path. For a couple years, they drank and raised hell, and then they knuckled under and became serious citizens in the civil service. Yes, things were rotten amongst us, and the stupidity of student life was less stupid and harmful than 100 other kinds. Yet when I arrived at my distant lodgings and went to bed, all those thoughts had scattered in my mind was completely and expectantly occupied by the great promise which that day had made me. As soon as I wished, even the very next day, I was to meet Damian's mother. Let the students frequent their taverns and tattoo their faces. Let the world be rotten and await its destruction. What was that to me? I was waiting solely for my destiny to come face to face with me in a new guise. I slept soundly till late morning. The new day dawned for me as a solemn holiday, such as I hadn't experienced since the Christmas holidays of my childhood. I was filled with the deepest unrest, but without any fear. I felt that an important day had dawned for me. I saw and sensed that a world around me was transformed, expectant, full of personal significance, and solemn. Even the gently falling autumn rain was beautiful, silent, and full of earnestly joyous holiday music. For the first time, the outside world harmonized perfectly with my inner world. Such occasions are a holiday for the soul, and life is worth living. No house, no shop window, no face in the street disturbed me. Everything was as it had to be, but it wasn't wearing the empty face of the everyday and familiar. Rather, it was the expectant nature. It was reverently ready for destiny. That's how I had seen the world on the mornings of the major holiday, Christmas and Easter, when I was a little boy. I hadn't known this world could still be so beautiful. I had grown accustomed to live inwardly, and I was resigned to the belief that I had simply lost all feeling for the world outside, to the belief that the loss of those glowing colors was inevitably linked to the loss of childhood, and that, to some extent, the freedom and adulthood of the soul had to be paid for with the renunciation of that lovely shining. Now I saw, delightedly, that all of that had merely been covered over and thrown in the shade, and that it was possible, even for a liberated person giving up childish joys, to see the world in its radiance and to taste intimate thrills of a child's viewpoint. The hour came when I rediscovered that suburban garden beside which I had taken leave of Max Demian the night before. Concealed behind tall trees that were gray in the rain stood a small house, bright and cozy, tall flowering plants behind a big glass wall, dark room walls with pictures and bookshelves behind gleaming windows. The entrance door led directly into a little heated vestibule. A silent elderly maid, dark complexioned, with a white apron, invited me in and took my coat. She left me alone in the vestibule. I looked around, and at once I was in the midst of my dream. Upon the dark wooden wall, over a door, hung a well-known picture under glass in a dark frame. My bird, with the golden yellow sparrowhawk's head, breaking its way out of the globe. I stood still, deeply moved. My heart was so happy and melancholy at the same time, as if at that moment everything I ever did or lived through was coming back to me in the form of a response and my fulfillment. Quick as a flash, I saw a throng of images racing past my soul. My father's house in my hometown, with the old stone coat of arms at the top of its entrance archway. Demian as a boy, drawing the coat of arms. Myself as a boy, fearfully ensnared in my friend Cromer's evil spell. Myself as an adolescent, painting the bird of my desire at the quiet table in my little student's room. My soul entangled in the web formed by its own threads. And everything down to that very moment, re-echoed in my mind while I affirmed it, responded to it, approved it. With eyes that had become moist, I gazed at my picture and read within myself. Then I looked down. Below the picture of the bird, in the now open doorway, stood a tall woman in a dark dress. It was she. I was unable to say a word. Her face timeless and ageless like her son's, and simply filled with enthusiastic willpower, the beautiful, venerable lady was smiling at me amiably. Her gaze spelled fulfillment. Her welcome signified homecoming. In silence, I held out my hands to her. She grasped both of them with her own firm, warm hands. "You're Sinclair. I recognized you at once. Welcome." Her voice was deep and warm. I drank it in like sweet wine. And now I looked up at her tranquil face, at her dark and unfathomable eyes, at her vivacious, mature lips, at her open, princely forehead, which bore the mark. "How happy I am," I told her, kissing her hands. "I think that all my life I've always been on a journey, and now I've arrived home." She gave me a maternal smile. "No one ever arrives home," she said amiably, "but when the paths of friends meet, the whole world looks like home for a while." She expressed what I had felt on my way to meet her. Her voice and even her words were very similar to her son's and yet quite different. It was all more mature, warmer, self-evident, but just as Max, years ago, had never given anyone the impression that he was a young boy, in the same way his mother didn't look like the mother of a grown son. The aura of her face and her hair was so young and sweet, her golden skin so taut and unwrinkled, her mouth so rosy. She stood before me looking even more regal than in my dream. In her proximity was love's happiness. Her gaze was fulfillment. And so this was a new guise in which my destiny revealed itself to me. No longer severe, no longer making me lonely. No, ripe and pleasure-laden. I made no decisions. I took no vow. I had arrived at a goal, and at an elevated stopping place on my journey, from which the continuation of the path was revealed in its length and splendor, striving toward promised lands, shaded by treetops of nearby happiness, cooled by gardens of all sorts of pleasure. Let things go with me as they might, I was blissful just knowing that this woman existed, just drinking in her voice and inhaling her presence. Let her become my mother, my beloved, my goddess, as long as she was there, as long as my path was close to hers. She pointed up at my picture of the sparrowhawk. "You never gave our Max greater pleasure than with this picture," she said reflectively. "And me too. We've waited for you, and when the picture came, we knew you were on the way to us. When you were a little boy, Sinclair, one day my son came home from school and said, 'There's a boy who has the mark on his forehead, and he has got to become my friend.' That was you. You didn't have an easy time of it, but we trusted in you. Once when you were home on vacation, you met Max again. At the time you were about 16. Max told me about it." I interrupted her. Oh, I'm sorry he told you about that. I was then going through my most miserable phase. Yes, Max said to me. Now Sinclair has his hardest time ahead of him. He's trying once more to escape into society. He's even become a tavern goer, but he won't succeed. His mark is hidden, but it burns him in secret. Wasn't that so? Oh, yes, it was precisely so. Then I found Beatrice, and then finally another guide came my way. His name is Pistorius. Only then did it become clear to me why my boyhood was so closely linked to Max, why I couldn't break away from him. My dear lady, dear mother, I often thought at that time that I'd have to kill myself. Is everyone's path that difficult? She stroked my hair with a hand that was as light as air. It's always difficult to be born. As you know, the bird must make an effort to break out of the egg. Think back and ask, was the path really that difficult? Merely difficult? Wasn't it also beautiful? Could you have thought of a more beautiful, easier one? I shook my head. It was difficult, I said, as if asleep. It was difficult until the dream came. She nodded and looked at me penetratingly. Yes, one must find one's dream, then the path becomes easy. But no dream lasts forever. Each one is replaced by a new one, and you shouldn't try to hold on to any of them. I was severely frightened. Was that already a warning? Was that already a rejection? But I didn't care. I was ready to let myself be guided by her without asking what the goal was. I don't know how long my dream will last, I said. I wish it were eternal. Below the picture of the bird, my destiny has welcomed me, like a mother, and like a beloved. I belong to my destiny and to no one else. As long as the dream is your destiny, you must remain faithful to it, she said in earnest confirmation of my words. A sadness seized on me, the ardent desire to die at that enchanted hour. I felt tears, how infinitely long it had been since I last wept, welling up in my eyes uncontrollably and overpowering me. I turned away from her violently, walked over to the window, and looked out over the flower pots with unseeing eyes. Behind me, I heard her voice. It sounded calm, yet it was full of tenderness as a goblet filled to the brim with wine. Sinclair, you're a child. You know that your destiny loves you. One day it will be all yours, just as in your dreams, if you remain faithful. I had regained control of myself, and I turned my face to her again. She gave me her hand. I have a few friends, she said with a smile. A few very rare, very close friends who call me Lady Eve. You may call me that too, if you like. She led me to the door, opened it, and indicated the garden. You'll find Max out there. Beneath the tall trees, I stood numb and shaken, more awake or deeper in dreams than ever. I didn't know which. Quietly, the rain was dripping from the boughs. I walked slowly into the garden, which extended far along the riverbank. I found Demian. He was standing in a little open garden building, stripped to the waist, practicing boxing with a sand-filled bat that was suspended there. I halted in amazement. Demian looked marvelous, with a broad chest and a firm, manly head. He raised arms with their top muscles were strong and capable, and his movements sprang like plain fountains from his hips, upper back, and shoulder joints. Demian, I called, what are you doing there? He laughed merrily. I'm practicing. I promised a little Japanese a wrestling match, and the guy is as nimble as a cat and naturally just as shy, but he won't beat me. It's a kind of humbling that I owe him in a very small way. He pulled on his shirt and jacket. You've already met my mother, he asked. Yes, Demian, what a splendid mother you have. Lady Eve, the name suits her perfectly. She's like a mother of all beings. He looked into my face reflectively for a moment. You already know that name. You have a right to be proud, young man. You're the first person she's ever told it to from the outset. From that day on, I frequented that house like a son and brother, but also like a lover. When I closed the gate behind me, yes, as soon as I saw the tall trees in the garden looming up in the distance, I felt rich and happy. Outside, reality existed. Outside, there were streets and houses, people in their institutions, libraries, and lecture halls. But in here, there was love, soul. Here, fairy tale and dream dwelt. And yet our life was by no means cut off from the world. In our thoughts and conversations, we often lived right in the midst of it, but on another plane. We were separated from the majority of people, not by frontiers, but merely by a different way of seeing. Our task was to present an island to the world, in the world, perhaps a model to be followed, but at any rate to make our life the enunciation of a different possibility. I, who had been solitary for so long, became acquainted with the society that is possible among people who have experienced total isolation. Never again did I desire to return to the banquets of the fortunate, the feasts of the happy. Never again was I assailed by envy or homesickness when I observed the societies of others, and slowly I was initiated into the misery of those who bore the mark on their person. We who bore the mark might well be considered by the rest of the world as strange, even as insane and dangerous. We had awoken or were awaking, and were striving for an ever more perfect state of wakefulness, whereas the ambition and quest for happiness of the others consisted of linking their opinions, ideas, and happiness ever more closely with those of the herd. They too showed signs of strength and greatness, but as we saw it, whereas we marked men represented nature's determination to create something new, individual, and forward-looking, the others lived in determination to stay the same. For them, mankind, which they loved as much as we did, was a fully formed entity that had to be preserved and protected. For us, mankind was a distant future toward which we were all journeying, whose aspect no one knew, whose laws weren't written down anywhere. Besides Lady Eve, Max, and me, our circle included many other questers of very different kinds, some closer to us, some more distant. Many of them traveled special paths, had set unusual goals for themselves, and were adherents of special opinions and duties. Among them were astrologers and Kabbalists, even a follower of Count Tolstoy, and all sorts of gentle, shy, vulnerable people, followers of new sects, practitioners of Hindu, yoga, vegetarians, and others. Actually, we had nothing in common intellectually with all these people except the respect each of them accorded to the secret life streams of the others. Others were closer to us, those who pursued mankind's quest for gods and new ideals in the past, and whose studies often reminded me of those of Pistorius. They brought along books, translated texts in ancient languages for us, showed us illustrations of old symbols and rites, and taught us to see that mankind's entire treasury of ideas up to now has consisted of the dreams of the unconscious soul, dreams of which mankind has gropingly followed the premonitions of its future possibilities. And so we ranged through the ancient world's marvelous, thousand-headed cluster of gods, all the way to the dawning of the great change represented by Christianity. We became familiar with the creeds of pious anchorites, and the changes in religions from one nation to another. And from all we've collected, we've derived a critique of our own age and present-day Europe, through mighty efforts had created powerful new weapons for mankind, but had finally fallen into a deep and at last a blatant spiritual desolation, for it had gained the whole world while losing its soul in the process. Here, too, there were believers and confessors of well-defined hopes and doctrines of salvation. There were Buddhists who wanted to convert Europe, and disciples of Tolstoy and other creeds. We, in the narrow circle, listened but accepted none of those doctrines as anything but symbols. We marked men were not at all worried about the shape the future would take. To us, every credo, every doctrine of salvation seemed stillborn and useless. There was only one thing we conceived as our duty and destiny, for each of us to become so completely himself, so completely in harmony with the creative germ of nature within himself, living in accordance with its commands, that the uncertain future would find us ready for any eventuality, whatever it might bring. For this, whether spoken or unspoken, was clear in all our minds, that a rebirth and the collapse of what now existed was near and already perceptible. Demian said to me at times, what will come is beyond imagining. The soul of Europe is an animal that has lain in festers for an infinitely long time. When it's freed, its first impulses won't be of the most charming kind, but its path and byways don't matter as long as the true distress of its soul is revealed. That distress, which for so long has again and again been falsely denied and anesthetized, sometimes words, I swear. That will be our day. Then we'll be needed, not as guides or legislators. We won't live to see the new laws, but as willing people ready to go along and take a stand where destiny calls them. Look, all people are ready to accomplish unbelievable things when their ideas are threatened, but no one's there when a new idea, a new ideal, a new, possibly dangerous, and unfamiliar stirring of growth knocks at the door. We will be those few who are there and go along. That's what we're marked for. As Cain was marked to arouse fear and hatred and to drive the people of those days out of their idyllic, narrow confines into perilous distances. All the people who have affected the course of mankind, all of them without exception, they were only capable and influential because they were prepared for their destiny. That goes for Moses, Buddha, it goes for Napoleon and Bismarck. Whichever movement a person serves, whichever pole governs his actions, it's not for him to choose. If Bismarck had understood the Social Democrats and had adapted his policies to them, he would have been a smart man, but not a man of destiny. And so it was with Napoleon, with Caesar, with Loyola, with all of them. That must always be conceived of the biological and evolutionary sense. When the enormous changes on the Earth's surface drove aquatic animals onto land and terrestrial animals into the water, it was the individuals ready for their destiny that were able to accomplish unheard of things, and to save their species by means of new adaptations. Whether the rescuers were individuals that had earlier been outstanding in their species as conservatives and preservers of old ways, or whether the eccentrics and revolutionaries saved the species, we don't know. They were ready and thus able to preserve the life of the species for the necessary new developments. That we do know. Therefore, we want to be ready. Lady Eve was often present during such discussions, but she herself did not speak in that fashion. For each of us who uttered his thoughts, she was a listener and echo, full of trust, full of comprehension. It was as if all of our thoughts originated in her and returned to her. To sit near her, to hear her voice occasionally, and to share in the atmosphere of soulful maturity that surrounded her was happiness to me. She immediately sensed any change, dullness of spirit, or renewal that might be taking place in me. I felt as if my dreams at night were inspirations coming from her. I often recounted them to her, and she found them comprehensible and natural. There was no peculiar feature that she couldn't follow with clear discernment. For a time, I had dreams that were like reconstructions of the conversations we had had during the day. I dreamt that the whole world was in an uproar, and that I, either alone or with Demian, was waiting in suspense for that great destiny. The destiny remained hidden, but somehow it bore the features of Lady Eve. To be chosen or rejected by her, that was destiny. Okay. Where was I? Sometimes she said it with a smile. Your dream isn't complete, Sinclair. You've forgotten the best part. And then at times I remembered the rest and couldn't understand how I had forgotten it. Occasionally I became dissatisfied and tortured by desires. I thought I could no longer abide to see her next without me taking her in my arms. That, too, she would notice at once. When I once stayed away for several days and then returned all upset, she took me aside and said, You shouldn't surrender yourself to wishes you don't believe in. I know what you desire. You must be able to give up those wishes or else desire them completely and firmly. If someday you're able to make the request, feeling quite certain it will be granted, then it will actually be granted. But you make wishes and then regret them, feeling afraid all the while. But you have to get over that. I'll tell you a tale. And she told me about a young man who was in love with the star. He stood by the sea, held out his hands, and worshipped the star. He dreamt about it and turned his thoughts to it, but he knew, or thought he knew, that a star couldn't be embraced by a human being. He deemed his fate to love a heavenly body with no hope of it being requited. And on the basis of that notion, he constructed an entire poetics of life, consisting of renunciation and silent, faithful suffering, which was to improve him and purify him. But all of his dreams were of the star. Once he was standing by the sea again at night, and on the high cliff, looking up at the star and blazing with love for it. And in a moment of supreme longing, he jumped and plunged into the void in the direction of the star. But at the moment he jumped, he still thought, quick as a flash, but it's impossible. And there he lay, down on the beach, shattered. He didn't know how to love. If at the moment he jumped, he had had the psychic strength to believe firmly and certainly that his love would be requited, he would have flown into the sky to be united with the star. Love ought not to make requests, she said, but shouldn't make demands either. Love must have strength to reach certainty for itself. Then it no longer undergoes the power of attraction, but exerts it. Sinclair, your love is being attracted to me. Whenever it begins to attract me, I shall come. I don't want to make a gift of myself. I want to be one. But another time she told me another tale. It was about a man who loved without hope. He withdrew completely inside himself and thought he would burn up with love. He lost contact with the world. He no longer saw the blue sky and the green forest. The brook didn't murmur for him. The harp didn't sound for him. Everything had gone under, and he had become poor and miserable. But his love grew, and he was much readier to die and wither away than to renounce the possession of the beautiful woman he loved. Then he noticed that his love had burnt up everything else in him. It became powerful and exerted more and more attraction, and the beautiful woman was compelled to follow. She came. He stood there with outstretched arms to draw her to himself, but when she stood there before him, she was totally transformed, and with trembling, he felt and saw that he had attracted to himself the entire world he had lost. It stood before him and yielded itself to him. Sky and forest and brook, everything came to meet him. It belonged to him. It spoke his language. And instead of merely winning a woman, he had the whole world in his bosom, and every star in the sky shone within him and sparkled joy into his soul. He had loved, and by doing so, had found himself. But most people love in order to lose themselves. My love for Lady Eve seemed like the only thing my life contained, but every day it took on a different aspect. Sometimes I was sure felt that it wasn't her physical person that my whole being was drawn to and strove to win, but that she was only a symbol of my inner self, and she was trying merely to lead me deeper into myself. Often I heard her say things that sounded like answers given by my unconscious to burning questions that were agitating me. Then again, there were moments when I was aflame with sensuous desire in her presence, and I kissed objects that she had touched, and gradually, by the sensuous and non-sensuous love, the reality and the symbol began to overlap. I kissed things she had touched. I was like, no, dude, coronavirus. What's wrong with me? That's literally like what I thought in that moment. Don't be kissing things people have touched, man. That's how viruses spread, people. Jesus. That's totally the thought that ran through my mind at that moment. My God. Oh, okay. My bad. Didn't mean to make you choke. Okay, let's continue. Oh my God, my eye. Guys, there's only like 10 pages left. Oh, my eye. I'm so cross-eyed right now. Oh my God. My eyes are bright. Okay, let's continue on. I think this is my favorite chapter of all of them, by the way. Is it? I don't know. Congrats, you're almost there. Thanks. Okay, where was I? At such times, I would think of her back in my room in calm lovingness while I thought I could feel her hand in mine and her lips on mine, or else I was with her, looking at her face, talking with her and hearing her voice, yet unsure whether she was real and not a dream. I began to sense how someone can possess a permanent immortal love. Well, while reading a book, I gained a new insight, and it was the same feeling as being kissed by Lady Eve. She stroked my hair, and her mature, fragrant warmth emanated from her smile, and I had the same feeling as if I had made some spiritual progress. I feel like I need chapstick again, hold on. Sorry, guys. It's like the final stretch, man. Oh God, what did Faustine just say? Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Okay. That's hilarious. Okay. Oh my God. So funny. Okay. Where was I? Okay. She stroked my hair, and her mature, fragrant warmth emanated from her smile. And I had the same feeling as if I had made some spiritual progress. Everything important and fateful for me was capable of assuming her form. She could transform herself into each of my thoughts, and each of them could be transformed into her. I had been dreading Christmas vacation when I would be with my parents because I thought it would surely be torture to be away from Lady Eve for 2 weeks. But it was no torture. It was wonderful to be home and to think about her. When I was back in my home, I stayed away from her house for 2 more days in order to enjoy the sense of security and freedom from dependence on her physical presence. I also had dreams in which my union with her took place in new metaphorical ways. She was an ocean and I a river flowing into it. She was a star and I another star journeying toward her. We met and felt each other's attraction, stayed together, and revolved around each other blissfully for an eternity in close musical orbits. I told her that dream the first time I visited her again. It's a beautiful dream, she said quietly. Make it come true. There came a day in early spring that I've never forgotten. I stepped onto the vestibule. A window was open, and a gentle breeze wafted the heavy scent of hyacinths through the room. Since there was no one to be seen, I went upstairs to Demian's study. I knocked softly at the door and went in without waiting for a response, just as I had been accustomed to do. The room was dark. All the curtains were drawn. The door to the little side room where Max had installed a chemistry lab was open. From there came the bright white light of the springtime sun that was shining through rain clouds. I thought no one was there, and I drew back one of the drapes. Then I saw Max Demian sitting on a stool close to the curtained window. He was hunched up and strangely altered, and in a flash, the thought ran through me. You've experienced this before. His arms were hanging motionless. His hands were in his lap. His face was leaning a little forward with his eyes open, unseen and lifeless. His rigid pupils reflected a small spot of harsh light and a piece of glass would. His pallid face was sunken in and had no expression except of horrible immobility. It looked like an animal mask on the portal of a temple. He didn't seem to be breathing. I felt a thrill of recollection. I had once seen him looking exactly like that years before when I was still a young boy. That's how his eyes had stared inwardly. That's how his hands had lain together lifelessly. A fly had crawled over his face, and at the time, some 6 years before, he had looked just as old and timeless. Not a wrinkle on his face was different today. Assailed by fear, I stepped softly out of the room and walked downstairs. In the vestibule, I met Lady Eve. She was pale and seemed weary in a way I didn't associate with her. A shadow passed through the window. A harsh white sunlight had suddenly disappeared. I was with Max, I whispered rapidly. Has anything happened? He's asleep or meditating, I don't know which. I saw him this way once before. I hope you didn't awaken him, she said quietly. No, he didn't hear me. I went right out again. Lady Eve, tell me, what's wrong with him? She drew the back of her hand across her forehead. Be calm, Sinclair. Nothing's happened to him. He has withdrawn. It won't last long. He has withdrawn. It won't last long. It's like a poet. She stood up and went out into the garden. Even though it was just starting to rain, I was aware that she didn't want me to accompany her, and so I paced to and fro in the vestibule, smelling the numbingly fragrant hyacinths, gazing at my painted bird over the door, and breathing in anxiously the strange shade that filled the house that morning. What was it? What had happened? Lady Eve soon returned. Raindrops hung in her dark hair. She sat down in her armchair. Weariness was upon her. I stepped up to her, leaned over her, and kissed away the drops from her hair. Her eyes were bright and calm, but the drops tasted like tears. Should I see how he is? I asked in a whisper. She smiled faintly. Don't be a child, Sinclair, she admonished me loudly, as if she wanted to break a spell she herself was under. Leave now and come back later. I can't talk with you now. I left and escaped from house and town in the direction of the hills. The thin rain fell on me obliquely. The clouds scudded by as if in fear, low in the sky under heavy pressure. Down below there was hardly any wind, but up in the hills a storm seemed to be raging. Several times the pale harsh sunlight momentarily broke through the steely gray of the clouds. Then a fluffy yellow cloud came drifting across the sky. It condensed against the gray wall, and in a few seconds the wind formed an image out of the yellow and blue, a gigantic bird that tore itself out of the blue chaos and with broad wing beats disappeared into the sky. Then the storm became audible, and rain mixed with hail rattled down. A brief clap of thunder with a frightening and improbably loud noise crashed over the rain-lashed countryside. Immediately thereafter, a glimpse of the sun broke through, and on the nearby mountains, pale snow gleamed in an unreal pallor above the brown woods. When I returned hours later, wet and windblown, Demian himself opened the door to the house. He brought me up to his room. In the lab, a glass flame was burning, papers were scattered around, and he seemed to have been working. Sit down, he said invitingly. You must be tired. It was a terrible storm, and I can see you were out in the midst of it. Tea is on the way. Something is happening today, I began hesitantly. It can't be only this little storm. He looked at me inquiringly. Have you seen anything? Yes, for a moment I saw an image distinctly in the clouds. What sort of image? It was a bird. The sparrowhawk? Was it that? Your dream bird? Yes, it was my sparrowhawk. It was yellow and gigantic, and it flew into the dark blue sky. Demian heaved a deep sigh. There was a knock. The elderly maid was bringing tea. Take some, Sinclair, please. I believe you didn't see the bird merely by chance. By chance? Do people see things like that by chance? You're right, they don't. It means something. Do you know what? No, I only feel that it means some catastrophe, a step forward in our destiny. I believe it concerns us all. He was pacing back and forth excitedly. A step forward in our destiny, he shouted. I had the same kind of dream last night, and yesterday my mother had a premonition that meant the same thing. I dreamt I was climbing a ladder that was leaning up against a tree trunk or a tower. When I reached the top, I saw the whole countryside. It was a wide plain, on fire, with all its towns and villages. I can't tell you all of it yet. Not everything is clear to me yet. Do you interpret the dream as applying to you? I asked. To me? Of course. Nobody dreams of things that don't concern them. But it just doesn't concern me alone. You're right about that. I can make a fairly accurate distinction between dreams that indicate stirrings in my own soul and those very rare ones that point to the destiny of mankind as a whole. I've seldom had such dreams, and never one of which I could say was a prophecy and came true. Interpretations are too uncertain, but this I know for a fact. I've had a dream that doesn't concern me alone. You see, this dream is connected with others that I've had in the past, and it's a continuation of them. It's from these dreams, Sinclair, that I derive the premonitions I've already spoken to you about. We know that the world we live in is thoroughly decayed, but that's not a sufficient reason to prophesy its destruction or something like that. But for several years I've had dreams from which I conclude or feel, or whatever you have, or what have you. Let's say I feel that the collapse of an old world is moving closer. At the first, premonitions were very weak and remote, but they've become more and more distinct and strong. So for all I know, that is something big and terrible is impending, something that concerns me and everybody. Sinclair, we're going to live through this thing we've often discussed. The world wants to renew itself. There's a smell of death in the air. No new thing can arrive unless an old thing dies. It's more terrible than I had imagined. I gazed at him in fear. Can you tell me the rest of your dream? I requested timidly. He shook his head. No. The door opened and Lady Eve came in. There you are sitting together. Children, aren't you sad? Are you? She looked lively and no longer tired. Demian smiled at her and she came over to us as a mother comes to frighten children. We're not sad, Mother. We've just been puzzling over these new signs a little. But it doesn't matter. Whatever is coming will suddenly be here. And then we'll learn soon enough what we need to know. But I was in a bad mood, and when I took my leave and was walking through the vestibule alone, I felt that the fragrance of the hyacinths was weak, stale, and corpse-like. A shadow had fallen over us. Ooh-wee. All right, how much time do we have left? I think we're good, right? 4 hours in total is 60 minutes. That's 240. We've been going for 170 minutes. Psh, we got plenty of time. I ain't even close to time yet. Guys, we're on the last chapter. We're on the last chapter. Chapter 8, the beginning of the end. The beginning of the end. Yeah. Interesting. The beginning of the end. It's kind of ominous. You know? The beginning of the end. Like, well, shit. I might wear my hair like this in the live tomorrow. We'll see. Okay, you guys ready? Oh, my neck is stiff. Oh, Jesus. Yeah. You guys ready? Let's do this, yo. Last chapter. Chapter 8, the beginning of the end. My eyes are so crossed. Okay. Dang, boss, dang. Getting all deep with it. Wangled. The word wangled is in here. Interesting. Okay. I had wangled. It sounds like it should be wrangled. I had wrangled permission. But it says wangled. Like, it sounds like I should be saying wrangled, but that I have like a speech impediment and I'm saying wangled instead of wrangled. It's just me. I had wangled. I sound like Elmer Fudd. I had wangled. Oh, God. Yeah, exactly. I sound like Elmer Fudd. Oh, my goodness. Okay. I had wangled permission to stay in town for the summer term, too. Instead of staying in the house, we were now almost always in the garden by the river. The Japanese who incidentally had lost the wrestling match badly was gone, as was the Tolstoy disciple. Demian kept a horse and rode untiringly every day. I was often alone with his mother. At times I was surprised by the peacefulness of my life. I had been so long accustomed to being alone, to practicing resignation, to tussling strenuously with my torments, that those months in town seemed to me like a dream island on which I could live in comfortable enchantment, devoting myself exclusively to beautiful, pleasant things and ideas. I sensed that it was a foretaste of that new, higher society we were discussing. And occasionally I became very sad over that happiness because I was well aware it couldn't last. I was meant to exist in the lap of plenty and ease. I needed torment and persecution. I felt that someday I would awaken from those beautiful images of love and once more be alone, all alone, in the cold world of the others, where there was only solitude or struggle for me, not peace or participation. Then I nestled into Lady Eve's nearness with redoubled tenderness, glad that my destiny still bore those beautiful calm features. The summer weeks went by quickly and easily. The term was already finishing. It was almost my time to say goodbye. It would have been wrong for me to think about it, and I didn't. Rather, I clung to those lovely days as a butterfly clings to the honey flower. That had been my time of happiness, the first fulfilling time in my life, and my acceptance into the group. What would come next? I would once again fight my way through, suffering from longing, dream dreams, and be alone. On one of those days, I was so greatly overcome by that premonitory feeling that my love for Lady Eve suddenly flared up painfully. My God, just a little while and I wouldn't be seeing her, wouldn't be hearing her firm, lovable steps in the house, Would it be finding her flowers on my table? And what had I accomplished? I had dreamed and cradled myself in comfort instead of winning her, instead of fighting for her and seizing her to be mine forever. Everything she had ever told me about true love now came back to me. 100 subtle words of exhortation, 100 gentle allurements, perhaps promises. What had I done with it all? Nothing. Nothing. I took a stand in the middle of my room, summoned up every ounce of consciousness, and thought about Eve. I wanted to gather all the strength of my soul so that she would feel my love, so that she would be compelled to come to me. She had to come and long for my embrace until she won it. My knees must burrow insatiably into her ripe, loving lips. Oh, my kisses. I read my knees. I was really confused. I read my knees must burrow into her lips. I was so confused. Oh my God. It's not what it says. It says kisses, not knees. Where the fuck did I get knees? What the fuck? I'm sorry. I feel like a really funny. Okay, I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna continue. She had to come and long for my embrace until she won it. My kisses must burrow insatiably into her ripe, loving lips. Oh, okay. I stood there, harnessing my powers until a chill spread through me. Starting with my fingers and feet, I felt strength emanating from me. For a few moments, something inside me contracted firmly and tightly, something bright and cool. For a moment, I had the sensation of carrying a crystal in my heart, and I knew it was myself. The coldness reached my breast. When I awoke from that frightening exertion, I sensed that something was on its way to me. I was dead with exhaustion, but I was prepared to see Eve walk into the room, ardent and rapturous. Now a clatter of hooves hammered up the long street. It sounded close and metallic. All at once it stopped. I leapt to the window. Below, Demian was dismounting. I ran downstairs. What's going on, Demian? I hope nothing has happened to your mother. He didn't listen to what I was saying. He was very pale, and from both sides of his forehead, sweat was running down his cheeks. He tied the reins of his horse, which was hot from running, to the garden fence, and took my arm and walked down the street with me. Have you already heard something? I didn't know a thing. Demian squeezed my arm and turned his face to me, and with a dark, sympathetic, odd look. Yes, my friend, it has started. I'm sure you knew about our very strained relations with Russia. What? Are we at war? I never thought it would happen. He spoke quietly, even though there was no one else around. It hasn't been declared yet, but the war is on. Rely on it. Since that other time, I haven't bothered you about this business, but in the meantime, I've seen new omens 3 times, and so it won't be the end of the world or an earthquake or a revolution. It will be a war. You'll see how popular it will be. People will be in raptures. Even now, everyone's looking forward to a scrap. That's how dull their life has become. But you'll see, Sinclair. This is just the beginning. Maybe it'll turn into a big war, a very big war. But even that is only the beginning. New times are dawning, and for those who cling to the old, the new will be horrible. What are you going to do? I was bewildered. It all still sounded strange and improbable to me. I don't know. And you? He shrugged his shoulders. As soon as they announce mobilization, I'll be in the army. I'm a lieutenant. You? I didn't know a thing about it. Yes, it was one of my ways of adapting. As you know, I've never wanted to be conspicuous outwardly, and I've always preferred to do a little too much in order to be correct. I think that in a week, I'll already be at the front. For the love of God. Now, my boy, you mustn't get sentimental about it. Basically, of course, I won't get much pleasure out of ordering my men to fire at living people, but that will be secondary. Now, each of us will get caught up in the big wheel. You too. You'll definitely be drafted. And your mother, Demian? Only at that point did I recall what had been going on 15 minutes earlier. How the world had changed. I had been concentrating all of my strength in order to conjure up the sweetest image, and now destiny was suddenly staring at me in a new form from a menacingly horrid mask. My mother? Oh, we don't need to worry about her. She's safe, safer than anyone else in the world is today. You love her that much then? You knew, Demian? He laughed cheerfully and unconstrainedly. My little friend, of course I knew. No one has yet called my mother Lady Eve unless he was in love with her. By the way, what was going on? Didn't you summon her or me today? Yes, I called. I called for Lady Eve. She sensed it. She sent me off to see you at once. I had just told her the news about Russia. We turned back, not saying much more. He untied his horse and mounted. It was only when I was upstairs in my room that I noticed how exhausted I was, from Damian's message and even more from my previous exertion. But Lady Eve had heard me. With my thoughts, I had reached her heart. She would have arrived herself, except that, how odd this all was, and basically, how beautiful. Now a war was upon us. Now all that we had talked about so often was to start happening, and Demian had known so much about it in advance. How strange it was that now the current of the world was no longer going to flow somewhere past us, that it was now suddenly moving right through our hearts. The adventures and wild destinies were summoning us, and that now or soon the moment would come when the world needed us, when it would be transformed. Demian was right. One shouldn't get sentimental about it. Only the peculiar thing was that now I would be experiencing destiny, usually such a personal matter, in common with so many others, with the whole world. Good. I was prepared. When I walked through town that evening, there was a hubbub of great excitement in every nook and cranny. Every word, war. I arrived at Lady Eve's house. We had supper in the little garden house. I was the only guest. No one said a word about the war. Only very late, shortly before I left, did Lady Eve say, "My dear Sinclair, you summoned me today. You know why I didn't come myself, but don't forget, now you know how to call me, and whenever you need someone who bears the mark, call again." She stood up and walked ahead of us through the twilight of the garden. The mysterious woman strode, tall and regal, among the silent trees, and above her head shone the numerous stars, small and delicate. I'm reaching the end. Things took their swift course. Soon war was declared, and Demian, strangely unfamiliar looking in the uniform with the silver gray coat, departed. I escorted his mother back up to her home. Soon, I too said goodbye to her. She kissed my lips and clasped me to her breast for a moment, while her large eyes blazed into mine, close and intensely. And all the people were like brothers. They had the fatherland and honor in mind, but it was destiny into whose unveiled face they were all gazing for a moment. Young men left their barracks and boarded trains, and on many faces I saw a mark, not ours, a beautiful, dignified mark, signifying love and death. I, too, was hugged by people that I had never seen, and I understood and gladly reciprocated. It was an intoxication in which they acted that way. They weren't in harmony with their fate, but the intoxication was holy. It was caused by all their having taken a brief, rousing look into the eyes of destiny. It was nearly winter by the time I was sent to the front. In the beginning, despite the sensations aroused by the constant gunfire, I was disappointed in everything. Earlier, I had thought a lot about why it was so extremely unusual for a person to be able to live for an ideal. Now that I saw that many people, all in fact, are capable of dying for an ideal, only it mustn't be a personal, freely chosen ideal, but one held in common and taken over from other people. But as time went by, I saw that I had underestimated people. Even through military service and their shared danger made them so much alike. Nevertheless, I saw many, the living and the dying, approach the acceptance of destiny in a splendid manner. Not only while attacking, but all the time, many of them, very many, had that steady, distant, almost obsessed gaze that is not directed at goals, but indicates complete surrender to the prejudice. Couldn't say a word. Okay, where was I? No matter what they choose to believe and think, they were ready, they were useful, the future could be formed from them. And no matter how inflexibly the world was clamoring for war and heroism, honor and other outmoded ideals, no matter how remote and unlikely every voice that apparently spoke up for humanity sounded, all of that was merely superficial, just as the question of the external and political aims of the war remained superficial. Deep down, something was evolving, something like new humanity, because I could see many people, and a number of them died alongside me, who had gained the emotional insight and hatred and rage, killing and destroying, were not linked to the specific objects of that rage. No, the objects, just like the aims, were completely accidental. Those primal feelings, even the wildest of them, weren't directed against the enemy. Their bloody results were merely an outward materialization of people's inner life. the split within their souls, which desired to rage and kill, destroy and die, so that they could be reborn. A gigantic bird was fighting its way out of the egg, and the egg was the world, and the world had to fall to pieces. One early spring night, I was standing guard in front of the farmhouse we had occupied. A listless wind was blowing in capricious gusts. Armies of clouds were riding across the high heavens of Flanders. Somewhere behind them was a hint of moon. That whole day I had already been restless. Some worry was nagging at me. Now, on my post in the darkness, I was thinking lovingly of the images of my earlier life, of Lady Eve, of Demian. And I was leaning against a poplar tree and gazing at the agitated sky, in which the bright areas, mysteriously shifting, were soon transformed into large, radiating series of images. By the unusual slowness of my pulse, by the insensitivity, by the insensitivity of my skin to wind and rain, by the sparks of my inner alertness, I felt that a guide was near me. In the clouds I could see a great city form which poured millions of people who spread out in swarms over wide stretches of countrysides. In the clouds I could see a great city form which poured millions of people who spread out in swarms over wide stretches of countryside. Into their midst there stepped a powerful divine figure, sparkling stars in its hair, tall as a mountain chain, with the features of Lady Eve. Into that figure, as if into a gigantic cave, the columns of people vanished and were lost from view. The goddess crouched down on the ground, the mark on her forehead gleaming brightly. A dream seemed to overpower her. She shut her eyes, and her huge face was distorted with pain. Suddenly she screamed shrilly, and from her forehead shot stars. Many thousands of radiant stars which flung themselves across the black sky in splendid arcs and semicircles. One of the stars whizzed directly toward me with a bright sound. It seemed to be seeking me out. Then, with a roar, it exploded into 1,000 sparks. It yanked me upward and threw me to the ground again. With a thunderclap, the world collapsed above me. I was found near the poplar, the tree, covered with earth and wounded in many places. I was lying in a cellar. Cannons were roaring overhead. I was lying on a cart, bumping over empty fields. Most of the time I slept or was unconscious, but the more soundly I slept, the more violently I felt that something was drawing me onward, that I was following a power that had gained mastery over me. I was lying in a stable on straw. It was dark. Someone had stepped on my hand, but my inner self warned to move on. I felt a stronger pull away from there. Again, I was lying in a cart and, later on, a stretcher or ladder. I had a stronger and stronger feeling that I was being intentionally conveyed somewhere. All I felt was the urge to get there finally. Then I reached my destination. It was nighttime. I was fully conscious. I had just felt that pull and urge in me powerfully. Now I was lying in a room, bedded down on the floor, and I had the feeling that I was where I had been summoned to. I looked around. Right next to my mattress was another one. Someone on it who was leaning forward and looking at me. He had the mark on his forehead. It was Max Demian. I was unable to speak, and he too was unable or unwilling to. He just looked at me. On his face was the glow from a light bulb that hung above him on the wall. He smiled to me. For an infinitely long time he kept looking into my eyes. Slowly he moved closer to me until we were almost touching. "Sinclair," he said in a whisper. I signaled to him with my eyes that I understood him. He smiled almost as if in sympathy. "My young friend," he said with a smile. Now his mouth was right next to mine. He continued speaking quietly. "Can you still recall Franz Cromer?" he asked. I winked at him and managed to smile too. "Young Sinclair, pay attention. I'm going to have to depart. Perhaps you'll need me again sometime to protect you from Cromer or something else. If you call me then, I will no longer come riding so crudely on a horse or train. Then you'll have to listen with yourself, and you'll notice that I'm inside you. Understand? And one more thing. Lady Eve said that, if things ever went badly for you, I was to give you the kiss from her that she sent along with me. Close your eyes, Sinclair." I closed my eyes obediently. I felt a light kiss on my lips, on which there was always a little accumulation of blood that wouldn't decrease. and then I fell asleep. In the morning I was awakened. I was to be bandaged. When I was finally properly awake, I turned over quickly toward the neighboring mattress. A stranger was lying on it, someone I had never seen. The bandaging hurt. Everything that has been done to me since then has hurt. But whenever I find the key at times and descend all the way into myself, where the images of destiny slumber in the dark mirror, I need only lean over in the black mirror to see my own image, which now looks exactly like him, my friend and guide. The end. So the question is Demian real? Or has Demian been within him the whole time? That's what I just, that came to me at the end. I don't know. Interesting. Very interesting. Oh, hey. Oh, wow, you're leaving Spain? We don't know. You read a different one. That's why I was confused. I don't know. It's whatever was sent to me. Yeah, sounds like a realization of self. Yeah, exactly. Like he finally, like, understood how to, like, reach into himself. You know what I'm saying? Like, in a way, like he finally understood how to, you know, reach within himself for something. And when he feels like, no, you can't say it in the chat, please don't say it in the chat, DM me or something, but don't say it in the chat, please. But it seems to me kind of like what was I just saying? Shit. Yeah, like he it's almost like he figured out how to, like, kind of find his destiny within himself, you know what I mean, in a way, that what he's been kind of searching for the whole time, he finally kind of found it in a way. And he found it through Demian and Lady Eve. But it's almost like, it almost makes me question whether Demian and Lady Eve are real. And I know that sounds weird because obviously they've been prevalent in this entire book. But in a way, I don't know, for some reason it kind of makes me feel, it kind of just makes me wonder if Demian and Lady Eve are real. Or are they just what he has created to the one I read says if they are or not. Oh, okay. Yeah, so this must be, yeah, it says whatever, Dover Thrift Editions, I don't know, whatever that is. Yeah. So if you if there's a different kind of like ending that's a little more clear or clarifies it, it will, I guess, wait. If hold on, wait. You can let me know. Hold on a second. Okay, I'm trying to think of, you can let me know about the book, just not how it connects to the storyline. So Naz, if you wanted to tell me about the book and the answer to my question, then yes, you can definitely say that in the chat because we're just discussing the book. Just don't talk about how it relates to the storyline. That's all. But yeah, so if you want to talk to me about the other version of the book that slightly differs, please, yes, I'm curious about that. And if it says what's what, like if it is real or if it's not real, definitely. So tell me. Your German book ends the same as mine. Okay, well then if it's similar to Awake, I kind of don't want you to say anything in the chat because then we're going to end up revealing something about the BTS storyline that I don't want to reveal. It reminds me of animes always leaving you with, but what did that mean? Yeah, then just DM me now. So if you're gonna connect it to the storyline, then just DM me. But yeah, I mean, very interesting. I feel like, yeah, definitely don't do it to Caitlin. Don't tell Caitlin. I'll translate this to Caitlin if need be. But no, don't message Caitlin with anything. She's been, if she sees anything that possibly even looks like it could be related to anything, she doesn't read it. Like she's been trying to be really, really good at avoiding anything like that. So, yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Thought that's what you were asking. What was I gonna say? Shit, what was I gonna say? Okay, so Naz, in your version of the book, you said it says whether they're real or not, so that you can tell me. So in your version of the book, are they real or not? It almost seemed like Demian was used as a tool to show how Sinclair learned about the world and himself. Exactly, but I don't know if he was an actual person or if he created Demian as his method. You know what I'm saying? Like Demian was kind of created in his mind as his means, as his way of finding himself. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Yeah. So like, was Demian actually real? Or was it just like create? Because I mean, I keep hiccuping. Yeah, Naz, tell me if they're real or not. At least tell me that much. Interesting. Okay. Hold on. She just gave me an update. Okay, I can talk about this. Okay, so she says, okay, the one I read, Sinclair kills his father and the bully. So Sinclair kills Cromer, but his father too? Why his father? I'm confused. Well, I understand why he would kill the bully, but he didn't really have reasoning to kill the father. Like to kill his own father? Yeah, that's a little different. Just a bit. Yeah. Hold on, she's typing. Also, he was wondering why he got back the picture he sent to Demian. But in this one, he never got the picture back. They kept it. So obviously, if he got back the picture, that means, is it really the same book? I know, this is very different. So if he got back the picture, that means that it didn't actually reach them, which means that maybe they weren't real. Okay, but Naz, answer the most important question. Are they real or not? That's what we need to know. Oh my goodness. He sent it to the address he got from Demian, but it came back to him. Okay. So far I'm okay to say this because he lives live. Live is what? Live is live. No. What? I just remember there was some bad feelings with his father early on in the book, but nothing seemed to come of it. If it was written in original German, interpretations could be different for sure. But Amanda was saying that she has the book. Isn't it Amanda? I think maybe. I don't know. Was it Amanda? I think it was Amanda. Was saying that she has the book with her right now in German, and hers is the same as mine. When he was having a rough time, he tried calling Demian when he needed help, but he couldn't reach him. That's what she said. She's typing it on here, so that way, if there's something that I think might be storyline, I'll omit it from saying it, Because I don't want it in the chat, because if someone reads the chat back and they don't know storyline and they don't want any spoilers, you know. Yeah, I'm the filter. The question is, are they real? I know, I already asked her that and she hasn't said. Naz, are they real? Yes or no? Or is it still like up for determination? Like, is it still like things are hinting? At the end, he came to the house to see Demian and the mom, but said it looked like his. Oh, she's typing. It sounds to me like they don't outright say whether they're real or not, but it hints towards the fact that they're not. That's what it's seeming like to me. Okay. He realized why the painting came back to him was because it was on a wall in a frame and it was his own address. Eve and Demian are both me. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what it's hinting to. The other version of the book has different aspects to it, and talks about how the reason why when he sent the picture of the bird out, it came back to him, and the reason it came back to him is because it was technically addressed to him, and it was in a wall. It coming back to him meaning like it was on the wall in a frame in his own house because he sent it basically to himself, thinking he was sending it to somebody else. This person, this Demian. But that's why the painting, he's the original Delulu. That's why the painting always resembled something familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Yeah, it was Demian, it was the mom, it was him, all in one. So yeah, so it sounds to me like this guy obviously has issues, but it sounds to me like he I don't know if I feel like this isn't all that though. I feel like that also what you just mentioned, it involves other aspects of things as well. I don't feel that part of that is necessarily this book, but maybe other aspects of things as well. If that makes sense. I don't think everything that happens in like all of that is just this book. I think there's other things coming into play as well. If that makes sense. Oh man. Yeah. So anyway, I feel, you know how like people with and I please correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to get something wrong with in something like this. But you know sometimes people with like multiple personality disorder, it's almost like their mind creates that person, whether it's their other personality is someone who's like super aggressive and opinionative and likes to get and gets defensive and angry all the time, whether it's someone who's like sweet and sensual and sexual. It's almost like their mind creates this other person because they themselves can't handle, like if it's the person that's very assertive saying the things that need to be said. So their mind creates this other persona in a way, to handle those things, because it's not really them handling it, it's this other person handling it, but yet they're still able to accomplish the things that need to get done because it's being handled. Technically, it's being handled by them, but in their mind, it's someone else. Does that make sense? I feel like this is similar to that in a way, that he was struggling to, find himself, to I don't know, he was struggling to find himself, to have answers to things, and it's almost like his mind created Demian, and I kind of feel like the guy at the church was real, though. I feel like that guy was real, the organ player. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I kind of feel like his mind created Demian and his mother as a way to seek the things he needed to find and hear, but couldn't feel that he could do that himself. Does that make sense? I don't know. The version I just read had Demian saying, "If you want to speak to me, look inside yourself." I knew it. Okay, so Demian isn't real. Demian is within himself. That disorder is due to a childhood trauma. I feel like that gets into storyline with one of the other characters in the storyline. But I feel like I know where you're going. Queen, I feel like I know where you're going with one of the characters, which makes sense. I just don't want to talk about it in the chat. But yeah, okay. Just found another version of the book and Demian isn't real, okay. The kiss is mentioned in the book, but story-wise, I recollect something is different. Yeah, the altars in DID or MPD are created in the mind to cope with trauma. To the person, they're totally real, and if they're fully formed, they can totally speak, act, and live for the person. Yeah, that's what I feel. Oh no, you don't think it fits? Oh, I was thinking that was right. That he created them. Yeah, like Fight Club situation. Yeah, Ebony. Like a Fight Club situation. But not really, because in the Fight Club situation, it's like he actually lives like that person. I don't think he never lived as Demian. He never lived as Lady Eve. They're just there helping him. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying that that he has multiple personality disorder. If that's how I meant it to sound, that's totally not what I meant. I don't think he has multiple personality disorder. I was just trying to relate it to something. You know how your mind can create this this thing, and you yourself believe it to be real, whether it's multiple personality disorder, whether it's, in this case, it's kind of like a kid who has like an imaginary friend. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like it almost, he made Demian to cope. Exactly. That's what I mean. I just didn't know how to like explain it properly. Sorry. But your mind does that when people who okay, thank you, thank God someone understands what I'm saying. I'm so glad you guys understand, kind of, sort of, maybe. But you know how like some people who they're I guess their mind works differently. Their mind creates different people and stuff like that. And Abraxas as well. What? I'm confused. He doesn't have it, but it's the same type of, yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. That's what I was saying. Yeah, I definitely don't think he has it. But I think that just like a kid invents an imaginary friend, it's kind of like that similar thing. It's like, Demian was kind of like created to help him find the answers to the things he needed to find the answers to in his life. Abraxas as another aspect. Yeah, so is Abraxas an actual thing? It is an actual thing, right? It's not just made up in this book. Yeah, yeah. Sinclair talks about two worlds in the beginning, like the outside world and the inside world. Yeah, yeah. So maybe he created his own reality world. Exactly. That's definitely plausible. So okay, so Abraxas is an actual thing. I thought it was. I just wanted to make sure because now I don't even know anymore. But yeah, I thought it was. Okay, interesting. So now I just have to take everything I've read and learned, and when I record Wings with Caitlin sometime this weekend, I have to try to remember it all and relate it back to the story so I can explain it to her at the end, or try to, in some way, shape, or form, relate it somehow and it makes sense. That's gonna be the hardest part. Is like when I watch the first one. Yeah, exactly. Like when I watch the first one, when I watch Begin, I don't even remember exactly what he says in the beginning, but trying to relate what he says in the beginning with what I'm seeing, relating it to the storyline, relating it to the two members that are linked. Ah! Yeah, yeah. I know. I'll have to get the fully subbed ones. Um, I'll have to like search for them. Um, oh man, yeah. So there's that. So guys, apparently, oh, you just said pick your filter. I saw it now. So guys, apparently Naz created another say what reacts doing and saying less than appropriate things video that we will probably be reacting to this weekend as well. Are you doing short film and song together? Yes, just like I did with mine. I don't think we'll do a live after it like I did with mine. I don't know, because that was like 3. It depends on how long it takes us to get through with me having to explain everything to her and stuff. I don't know. That's gonna take probably a lot longer. But and we want to do all 7 in the same day. So that's why I don't know if, like I did last time, I did the live with it. I don't know if I'll do the live with it this time. I'll probably just do the lyric video and the short film. That's what I'm thinking, since we're going through all 7 together. Because she wants to be able to see them back to back so she can connect all of the items without forgetting what she previously. I keep hiccuping. Without forgetting what she previously saw. Oh my god, I have such bad hiccups. Hold on. Okay, hiccups are gone. I have to just do a simple breathing technique and I can get rid of the hiccups. Anyway, so yeah. I think because we're trying to do all 7 of them back to back, we're going to stick with the lyric video in the short film. I don't know. Well, like I said, we'll see. If we do the first one and I notice after doing the lyric video and the short film that we haven't been recording for that long, then I'll probably decide. I thought my screen froze. No, I was doing a breathing exercise to get rid of the hiccups. Oh my god! All Caitlin's gonna do is this. I'm so confused. That's what Caitlin's gonna do. That's so funny. She's just like, Jin, I swear, Jin, we're gonna have problems. It's like, yeah, he does that a lot. She's like, why does he keep looking confused? Every time Jin looks confused, my ass is confused. I'm like, yes, that's a thing. It happens. It'll keep happening. Yeah, get used to it. Yeah. Well, you guys saw how I was when I saw the short films. It's so funny. I noticed with me, I tend to like, I'm a talker, obviously, and I tend to talk through things. Even like, for instance, if I go through a haunted house, right? I go through the haunted house, and the whole time, and I don't watch horror movies or anything, right? But I go through the haunted house and I'm talking the entire. I've got to be so annoying to these fucking people. I'm talking the whole time. I'm just like, okay, okay, where are you? Okay, okay, that door's totally gonna open in a second. Oh, yep, it just opened. Okay, there he goes. Hi, how are you? Okay, you did a good job. Got me. Okay, okay. So what's around the next corner? And I'm literally just like talking the whole time I'm going through the haunted house. That's like my coping mechanism, I think. I don't know. But I'm just like, okay, oh shit, okay, great. Now this is gonna fucking jump out at me. Like, yeah, it's so bad. So, that's like, so as I'm trying to like figure something out or understand something, I tend to talk. So like, even like when I reacted to like, the Wings short films, yeah, the narration machine. Oh my god, it's totally. But yeah, so in a theater, no, I don't do it in like movies or anything like that. That annoys the shit out of me. No. I don't do it in movies or anything like that. But physically going through a haunted house, or obviously I'm reacting. I'm supposed to be talking. So if I'm on camera and I'm supposed to be talking, I'm supposed to be reacting, and I'm trying to figure out, I'll verbally say all the shit that's going through my mind, like, oh, what is that? Oh, wait, that looks like this. Hold on a second. Wait, let me back up. Oh my god, that totally looked like that. Yeah, like, so yeah. I'm just that person, I think. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I think they just borrowed elements of, but some stuff doesn't totally work in my head, especially after. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I said the second we finished it. I said, I think that there's aspects of this book that are in the storyline, but this whole book is not the storyline. No, there's no way it's not. Can we have a horror game? Let's play Anitra. What? What do you mean a horror game? I went to a haunted house forest once. I punched someone, got kicked out. See, my family used to we used to build and run haunted houses years ago. They were they were so elaborate and so amazing. So I like haunted houses, but yeah, I still just like talk through them the whole time. I don't really watch scary movies. Scary movies annoy the fuck out of me. I just don't like them. Like, there's always those stupid ass fucking people in horror movies, and it drives me crazy. I can't stand it. I can't. Guys, I don't do well with stupid. You guys know that. I don't do stupid. So. My boyfriend has played the Silent Hill demo, and he was, no, I can't do that. No way in hell. No way in hell. Nope. No way. I hated every second of just watching him do it. I hated every second of it. No. Baby. Baby, let's put the pizza in the oven. Yeah. They want me to do the Silent Hill demo and record me doing it. Oh my god. I was like, I hated every second of just watching you play it. He wouldn't get out of the house. Like, there was like 2 rooms. He would not leave those rooms. Oh, I'm talking about Resident Evil. I was talking about Resident Evil 7, I guess. Whatever. I just realized I didn't have my lights on the entire time. All I have is this light above me. Whatevs. It'll be brighter tomorrow. My bad, yo. Oh, man. Yes, Brian Maker. Silent Hill is chill, Anitra. Don't worry. Yeah, okay. I don't think so. No way in hell. I would get freaked out just watching you, so please don't. No. I won't. Trust me. No, thank you. I don't think so. No. Guys, I have to finish my cards from last week. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 done, and I have 5 more left to do tonight, so I can mail them tomorrow. A lot of international ones this time around. A lot of international ones that time around. Look at all my flower stickers. Yeah. So yeah, I still have to do 5 more tonight. So we're gonna put a pizza in the oven. I'm going to probably bring my laptop over here, watch some shows, and finish these last 5. 6 technically, because I think I can mail out your hats now. Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to get out of here. We're going to put a pizza in the oven. We're going to have dinner. I have to pee. Yeah. Oh, I will check that out. Don't you worry. Fasting. So ridiculous. Anyway. All right, guys. Anything I might have missed or any connections that you think the book had that I haven't made or whatever, just DM me. And you got your Yu-Gi-Oh card. Yay! Thank you. I'm glad you like. I have even more stamp editions now because I have like all of these stamps that I got in the mail. I have like all of these stamps in the mail. Like all of these. So yeah, got a bunch of them. Yeah. All I know is that if I ever give away a Veman card, I am 100% putting this stamp on it. How freaking cute would that be in a Veman card? Is it Dreamcatcher? I don't even know if I have a Veman photo card. I'm sure there's one in there somewhere. Because sometimes they do it in groups, you know? How cute would that be though, guys? That stamp on a Veman, for a Veman one? No? I'm sure I can Fasting. Oh man. And like I said, I don't even know if I have one actually. Oh shit. Wow, hold on a second. Someone just texted me interesting information about. Wow. Okay. Sorry. I just. Yeah. I don't know if I should like even say it. Yeah. I don't think I can. Very interesting information. So yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna go. I am going to. I'll be live again tomorrow. Don't you worry. Live at the normal time tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I do have, I have 3 things to open. I have 3 things to open. I will go to the post office again tomorrow morning to see if there's anything else. But I do have 3 things to open, and yeah, of course I'm gonna have photo card giveaways and stuff. But yeah, sorry guys. I can't. My bad. What was the cliffhanger last time? Didn't someone say that there was something I didn't tell you last time? Didn't someone tell me recently that like I teased something and I didn't say what it was some other time? It was recent. Maybe that's just when you guys said I left you on a cliffhanger because of the book. Maybe that's what it was. But I feel like there was something else. Am I going crazy? Am I losing my mind? I might be. I don't know. Interesting. Yeah, I remember that. But I felt like there was something else. I don't know. Okay. Well, that's okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to go for now. And I will talk to you guys in like, what is that? 14 and a half hours? I'll be talking to you guys in 14 and a half hours when I go live again for the normal live. Okie dokie. I am still working from home with reduced hours currently, but I am, yeah. For the time being. We'll see how long this lasts because currently our gyms are closed. Obviously, we can't really have a gym open with people touching things and using equipment and during this time. So our gyms are closed down. So yeah. In the meantime, we're closed for 2 weeks, hoping to reopen on the 1st. If things look better, we have no idea. So right now we're working from home and just kind of playing it by ear. So we'll see. So, okie dokie. All right, guys. I think that's it. I will be chatting with you tomorrow. I'm going to go eat dinner. You have a lovely, you have to go to work at Target. Yeah, people still need supplies. You guys have, that's good though. It's good that you still have work and you still have hours to work, because there's so many people who've been laid off because of this. It's crazy. So, yeah. What? Oh yeah, no, that already happened. Fusting. That already happened. They kicked them off and they closed them down. They closed down all the hotels as well. So no hotels have guests in them. All the beaches are closed. All of that stuff. So yeah, it's getting crazy. No, just the other day there was NAS, but not today. I'll talk about that on my live tomorrow as well, though. But yeah. Okay, so I will talk to you guys more tomorrow. All right? Bye, guys. Love you guys. Thank you for sitting through my book reading with me. I appreciate it very, very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. Hopefully I didn't stumble across too many words. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.